There we go.
Nice.
Hello. Hello.
Hello, hello.
How are you today?
Good. How are you? I'm sure it's early for you.
Yeah, well, it's not too bad. I'm usually up about this time anyway, so it's not a problem at all. It's very, very nice to meet you. I'm glad you sort of reached out and sort of, yeah, got in contact with me. It's great.
Good. Yeah. So, part of what we didn't get a lot of introduction. So what we're here to do is just sort of to get some information from you and talk to you about your experience in this space and sort of like get any advice that we can, and then also just sort of rift back and forth from the perspectives that we have
Sure.
on the work that is done in that, and to see where we go from there, because yeah, the work that is being done is being looked at from other people, so I want to start to get into it too. So Evan, if you would like to
You don't mind if I record this for my channel, do you?
please do. Oh
Please
yeah.
do, yeah.
Oh yeah, thank you.
Thank you. I'm live now, so yeah. Yeah.
Go ahead, if you want to go ahead and tell us about yourself.
Yeah. I'm Mark Reed. I recently got started on YouTube doing debate and just general conversations and interviews and things like that. The guys from NeverGameOver reached out to me, and I wanted to talk to you because I love talking to people. Basically, anybody. I'll talk to anybody. I will discuss things with anybody. I'm not really sure what you'd like to discuss with me, Don. I'm not sure how I can help you, but being a small channel, you're obviously trying to get started and rolling, and sort of get some traction. And I'm happy to help in any way I can, but I'm not sure what I can help with, to be honest with you.
Yeah, well, let's. I'll go ahead and tell you a little bit about our channel and what we're doing here.
Sure, yeah.
So Never Game Over. So our other co-host Scarlett is not here right now. So we come at our channel with a perspective of, if you've heard of modern monetary theory, and so it's if you've heard of Bernie Sanders, perhaps. Yeah, so his economic advisor, Stephanie Kelton, in the 2016 campaign comes from this perspective, and then there's resources that we can share after, but basically that lens through economic theory is a heterodox economic approach, and it basically is about how we look at productive capacity and money itself as a social government tool. So when we're thinking about how much something costs, or what we want to do as a society, basically it's about looking at economics through a lens of government being these institutions we created, a social tool that we've communicated and agreed to together, and like that's where money comes from. It's not this thing that exists in the ground and money goes up, money goes down, and so the questions about what we do in terms of what something costs is all just about yeah, the legality of it. How many votes do you have to get the spending for it? And then do you have the productive capacity, the resources, meaning the people and the natural resources in the ground, or maybe trading relationships? And so that's the lens that we come through. And so each of us have different perspectives. So Evan here's an electrical engineer who's been my friend from college who's been coming into this. Scarlett herself is a economist, and then I come from healthcare and have been studying anthropology. And so we are using that lens to get into the space of debating, to talk about all sorts of different things. We game, we go through lore and talk about how that relates to what MMT means, so the story. But then I personally focus a lot on the religious sociology, so like how arguments of religion have been influencing our politics, our economics, and then those stories of ourselves. And so the reason I wanted to contact you is because I've spent 2 years after my time in healthcare focusing on anthropology and using that research to see what people are doing. And you were one of the people that came up a lot in terms of these debates. And so I wanted to be able to convene with you, learn from you, share with you some of my perspectives from where we're coming from, and then see where we can go from there, mostly as an organics thing, because I think that there are some things that the anthropological aspects of, the arguments about God and religion and the ways we think about those questions as an identity that I think uh, can almost overshadow some of the scientific ones in a very unique way. And so you sort of merging the two, since you and some of the people that I follow are very, very keen on understanding the scientific principles behind that. And come from a background in bachelor's of knowing that myself. It'll be helpful, I think, convene some of that, because I do not see a lot of anthropological social arguments that come out when, Kent Hovind and a lot of these people are debating you. And
Yeah.
I think it'll be interesting to see where we go
Yeah,
with that.
sure.
But that was a long spiel to say that, if that makes any
That's okay.
sense.
No, no, it does. I just economics is definitely one of my weaker points. I've got to admit. Like I've talked with Leo Filius about this before, and he knows way more about sort of the economics and socioeconomics than I do. I'm more focused on sort of hard sciences. It's
Hmm.
interesting that you sort of talk about anthropology. I think I would certainly consider it a soft science. But it is a science. I definitely think it can be applicable as a science. So
Hmm.
I don't. It's kind of odd that you're not including it with that, but I guess you're talking about hard sciences, right? Like the physics and I mean, my background is IT, so
Oh,
I've come at it from a really weird angle. Um,
That's funny.
wow.
We both also come from IT.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
yeah, yeah. So I'm in university. I study computer systems and networking, basically. So
All right.
Okay.
distributed systems, essentially. Sort of, I guess you'd look at me going to be a network engineer or something of that
Mhm.
sort. So that's where I'm coming from. But I mean, I've been watching these kind of things for years, and I don't know. I just sort of fell into it. I don't know how I got here, to be honest with you. I've got no idea. So basically, I was watching Modern Day Debate one day, and Leo Filius, the guy I just mentioned, he didn't show up. He missed the date, and they said, "Can anyone fill in?" And I went, "Yes." A lot of this where I got to is sort of just saying yes to stuff, just things that I'm like, oh, should I do this or not? And just going, yeah, I'm going to do it,
Hmm.
regardless of the outcome. And yeah, that's basically it. As I said, I'm not sure how I can help you, and what you want to discuss. I mean, that's fascinating, and I haven't heard any anthropological arguments for or against God, really,
Mm.
um, except that I guess it's more likely that sort of God's an anthropomorphication of all of these sort of natural processes, I guess. But it's not something that's used in debate a lot. I've
Hmm.
got to admit, it just isn't.
That's what I'm excited to explore with you about.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. I'm happy to. And from sort of you came from a healthcare standpoint.
Hmm. And
What kind
cybersecurity.
of and cybersecurity? Excellent.
Yes.
And
What kind of IT you said?
what kind of healthcare background is that? Is
Oh,
that sort of
so I went to, without revealing my school, I went to school
oh,
for healthcare administration and natural science. So my track was to be a doctor, but also be trained in healthcare administration. So I actually focused on just doing basic pre-med classes that you would take to take the MCAT.
sure.
And my focus was on infant mortality and information systems. So for 2 years, I focused a lot on infant mortality. And then for the other 2 years, I focused on like information systems interoperability between hospitals and like getting their
Yep.
IT systems updated and the actual management of the people with that, not just the infrastructure and the desktop setups, but also like how people are feeling and dealing with the software, how it's working with them, what changes need to be made, those meetings. And
Yep.
so I walked away from healthcare because basically I discovered that a lot of I mean, specifically if we want to get like infant mortality, 75% of what causes the stress in those hormones for the baby to not make it till the age of 1 comes from, like, if it's stress, 75% of it, the hospital and the healthcare organizations are working with 25%. And we hear that with teachers. And so I had to walk away knowing that 75% of that work was, you know, economics and politics and social, cultural stuff, because we're in Ohio, in certain states like Ohio, like you can't do certain things if the state doesn't allow it. So you're limited depending on what the policies and the legal rights are. And so that sort of took me away. And I just focused more on cybersecurity. But that is what enthralled me to get into anthropology, because when I learned from reading about the, the people making these decisions, okay, if politics and economics are the things blocking things like, infant mortality being fixed, who are the people making these decisions and why? And as someone who's never been religious, I've never had that experience of what it's like to believe in a God. It was never, and I went to Jesuit school. I never expected it to be so a part of, these institutions and the ideology that runs a lot of things. But
Right.
as I researched more, I began to understand, oh, these are the things that sort of need to be tackled before you even can trickle down a little bit somewhat. And so that's how I got to, I guess, where I am and focusing on anthropology, watching a lot of modern day debate, like you said, and videos like you all, and reading about anthropology and economics. That's how I've gotten networked with the people in these organizations. But yeah, them too. Anthropology, I think, is because it's also changing really fast right now. Like some of the debates that are happening in that field, they're very, very keen to the story of us and very fascinating, but it's not met in the zeitgeist. So all sorts of different fields aren't really like, basically the researchers aren't talking to each other. And I find some of the arguments that they can make when combined with the hard science are very, very dynamic and denaturing to some of the debates that I've heard for when you get locked in this sort of space between a Kent Hovind and or someone else you just can't accept that you have two different realities. But the anthropology helps sort of connect why you would have that, and then brings out almost a defensiveness as to what identity that person is attached to and why, likely politically, that's making that reality blocked. And that helps sort of make sense between the two and makes it more political, of course. But I think that's why that I'm finding it extremely salient, and I want to get into that with you for sure.
Right. Well, politics and religion are sort of certainly, really linked. I was horrified actually the other day. I found out about the maternal deaths in America, and it's really high. It's compared to other first world countries, it's actually shockingly high.
In some cities, it's third world country level. Like you could compare the Middle East to some cities.
Yeah, so I was sort of shocked to hear that, and I have a lot of critical things to say about the healthcare system in America, as most Americans do, actually. So I think they're on the same page there. But is this, are you looking to do debate, or are you just, sort of just sort of getting people's perspectives on your channel, and you're going to keep to your channel? Does debate attract you at all, or is that something that you've sort of gone, well, I'm not interested in doing that, but I am interested in talking to people?
Okay, and I'll let Evan, I want you to respond to this after I say something real quick. It's mostly just gonna, so for us, video essays, because MMT is very denaturing, right? If money is not, tied to something in the ground and it's just Congress and resources, that's part of our spectrum of videos, because then that means for all sorts of institutions, right? Charity, the reason that when it gets into sort of religious arguments about where your taxes are going or where donations are going, where the community is putting money because of these identities that are attached to, if the government can be freed to give people that ability with, the legal institutions to do sort of the things that churches do in that space, then it frees up some of that moral argument. And we're planning to have video essays that go into that, but then also, yes, debating. I would love, and that's why I reached out to you. I would love to get connected and network with the people who are in this space so that we can start to bring these arguments into it. And then also, as a person of color, there's not really a lot of people debating in the atheist space that are coming at it, as a person of color. And I think that if it is, from my argument, tied to social anthropological identity, like there's a lot of freedom for me to like push at that defensiveness than like someone who's white is able to do, because the ability for me to talk about that experience and then connect that with the audience is a lot easier for me. And that's why I want to get into that space. Yeah.
You have that perspective that I will never have. I will never have that perspective. And that's,
and then Evan, I want you to add too, because that's why you're here. I need you.
Yeah. So I'm Evan. I'm an electrical engineer, as Kennedy introduced me earlier. Politics-wise, I started in college. I was part of a group that was tackling housing crises in Ohio. Yeah, so some of the things that we're looking to do are what Kennedy said. I also am trying to figure out how to reach out to local activists in our area and across the country to talk with them about what they're actually doing. I think debate's great, but not including the people who are actually doing the groundwork, I think is a fundamentally flawed way of addressing these things. And I want our channel to be able to kind of fill that space that I kind of think is lacking, if that makes any sense. So.
Yeah, so it sounds like you're sort of doing community activism organization. You're trying to start organizing people to a sort of a community voice kind of thing, which I think is wonderful. I think that's amazing. Just one thing I want to clarify. You said MMT. Is that modern monetary theory?
Yes.
I don't know a lot about economics. So
yes. Do you actually know who Rowan Gray is?
No, I'm sorry, I don't.
He's actually a famous. If you've heard of Rashida Tlaib, the representative from Detroit. One of the famous squad members in Ohio, America's Congress.
That's like Alexander AOC and stuff, right?
And Rashida Tlaib is one of them. And so Roman's one of the legal advisors and focuses on like money, specifically in the digitalization of the dollar with the ideas that we have. So he's an Australian actually, and has become a close mentor of mine. And I've learned a lot about Australia and its politics and the ways that like the hegemony and the orientation of where you have to go from his perspective as an Australian a lot. So if you want to learn about MMT and have any questions, he's probably someone you should go to first, especially since he's.
What was his name? Rowan
Gray.
Gray. Okay. Yeah, so by denaturing, you said you use this word a lot, denaturing. So what exactly do you mean by denaturing?
Right. So here's so if I can just be specific with the hard sciences, for example, like I've heard a lot of debates where you clearly know the evolutionary process and are able to just you yourself denature the fact that this person is coming from a perspective of a lack of evidence, a lack of science, and so you're denaturing the fact that they don't exist in the space similar to you. Like the evidence that you have for the hard sciences, like you are not competing, right? You've mentioned before that there are Christians who believe that God doesn't have to conflict with evolution, who are in the spaces of sciences or whatever, and this is not. Right, so they don't necessarily have to conflict. So with some people, I think it's more attached to their identity. But because you can exist in a space of making the religion malleable, that illustrates sort of an anthropological phenomena of the ability to do that. Because if you can hold basically this force deist God in your head, but your identity is attached basically to a Christian, but your view of God does not have a political anthropomorphic attachment to it in the way that you live and the way that you pursue with your vote and your politics and your lived experience, then that definition of God is like interesting to debate, and it helps explain why there's this identity attached atop to the scientific hard stuff. Because if that what I see in a lot of these debates is they're basically like, well, almost conspiratorial, like, well, you have the scientists and you have this is a religion itself, and it's like, well, no. And the anthropology and sociology helps to nature that your topology of claiming that, first of all, that this is a religion is a lot. It's a lot easier to sort of take that apart as an identity. And I think the reason that I don't see that a lot, because you're kind of taking apart the person you're talking to, depending on where they're coming from. And I use Kent Hovind as an example a lot because I've watched a lot of his videos. But, you know, like with what he's experienced.
I'm so sorry.
I know, but you got to get through it. But learning that, I've seen what he said about where the races come from, you know, where.
Right.
How if you have your religion, I have mine. We should just be able to teach it in public schools. His argument fundamentally dips. It drops there. Like you shouldn't be able to teach it in schools publicly, knowing that if you come from me an argument that public institutions are a legal agreement that we've had that says a third party whatever evidence that is the best consensus, that is what we will agree to legally. So if you can't meet that standard, like you will like that is more important to hit on. And like, why do you feel like you can't meet that standard? What is happening in America in and around the world that you can go to a university in Qatar, in Nigeria, and they have their religious identities, but you're still learning the same organic chemistry.
Right. Absolutely. Yeah.
And I think,
yeah.
yeah, and that I think you have to double down on some weird stuff if you want to make that argument as a conspiracy. And I think that's why I want to hit more. Like, okay, who is this conspiracy running by?
Well, the whole idea is that we've already tried this multiple times. That the evolutionary and well, really what we're talking about is young Earth creationism and intelligent design is what I was desperately looking for. Mm-hmm. Yeah, design is what we're looking for. Mm-hmm. So that's been tried in Kitzmiller versus Dover and multiple other trials to really test the idea that this could be a science. And it's failed miserably, mostly because the proponents of intelligent design will not go on the stand and sort of say, hey, it is equal to something. They won't sort of, I believe it was Behe himself that acknowledged that there is no peer-review tested paper out there for intelligent design. It just does not exist. And it seems like they really want to set up their own peer review that isn't to the standard of the scientific process, to sort of circumvent it. And that does worry me a lot, because they want it to be on equal footing when not even all journals are on equal footing. You know, there are certainly some journals that you trust less than others. Yeah, it's a big worry for me. But really, it was the sort of the denaturing. What exactly you mean by that? I didn't sort of get that. I get what you're saying. I do get what you're saying in the way that sort of Hoven. But when you mean denaturing, do you mean sort of the alienation of people from this idea of science? Is that what you were getting at? Sort of.
So when I say denature, I mean as a topology itself. And so the God belief, I see it as a topology, and some people like to debate within realms of it. So like some people debate within the hard science of the topology without arguing the fact that there's this God that they clearly believe in amongst other gods, you know. Right. So like and then also the epigenetics, where does the universe come from? Where does the Big Bang come from? So all of these different debates simultaneously happen. I noticed like all of them happen at the same time, and because I noticed them happening at the same time, I think the way that topology gets denatured, as in like if you view race as being real, like there are inherent differences between them. You have like the scientific debates aren't necessary. You have to get to the fact that you are viewing this person as a human differently than you, and that I think basically ultimately there are heartstrings that have to be pulled in this debate that I don't see happen. And I think when you denature the topology, so when you get to the identity, which I think is for Americans, right, because Christianity and the way that it gets talked about in our country, because the freedom of religion and the ability to not really engage, like our country does not engage, besides with the way our politics are oriented to focus more on the right, our populace is not really engaged with having, I think, a theocratic institution organizing all of our politics. And I think that identity that itself is happening as a denaturing over everything that is going on in your country too, in Australia. Like a fight's over, should you be organizing legal moral rights based on what someone's religion says, or based on secular humanist or maybe libertarian ideas of freedom? Right. And because the anthropology helps like say that we're not doing something new, right? In the past, and I don't know if you've heard of human domestication theory in anthropology before. No. Oh, so
I haven't either. Please enlighten me on this.
Yeah, so the part of that idea is that human beings, like dogs, are self-domesticated. So the reason we're sweeter and kinder and a little dumber is because we've grown in an environment of really trusting each other in order to survive. And so anthropology, like if you look at Paleolithic art and archaeological evidence, Like what we're finding is that there's no evidence of human beings causing if you've heard of the war against all, like human beings just existed in this period of skirmishes and tribalism for centuries and centuries, and we've been on this period of like getting over that. Anthropology denatures that and says that it's a little Rousseauian, and that we've lived in a state of egalitarianism because our trust and our incentives were so aligned with each other, that someone being an asshole and harming each other, or someone being a fanatic and wanting to, destroy the community, was someone that would get exiled and would get eaten by the animals. So that that was not common for human beings. And it helps denature this idea that human beings are these barbaric creatures, that even if God's not real, you need some elite hierarchical structure to keep us from being these animals to each other, right? And I think if you believe that human beings are these barbaric creatures, right, despite now this evidence that says the contrary, and like what's in our, like, no one wants to think of themselves as the bad guy. Before World War II, people were just firing up in the air and running away from war until we found a way to dehumanize people and cause PTSD to be prevalent. So what's happened with violence is clearly not normal. Like, this is not something that seems to be natural. If it was, we would find evidence for it in the ground somewhere, and we don't seem to see a lot of evidence for that. And that in anthropology, I think, is super, super empowering. There's a guy named Rutger Bregman who wrote a book called Humankind: A Hopeful History. He's Dutch, and he's been around the world talking about how some of these researchers have really, painted this picture of like, the story of us is a little different than what we've been told. And I think that that's super empowering, because if you want to have a God that's an elite structure for morals, for how society should be organized, even if he's not real. So that's not the Kent Hovens. That's the people who believe in this deist force God, who still think Christian values should be like applicable to law because they are important for society to be organized. It denatures that part. That part is like almost more, because the sciences won't hit that part. The part that says...
You mean that you're sort of, by denature, you mean that we have this idea of the nature of humankind, sort of the human condition is violent and always sort of, that is not necessarily the case. It may be the case that we do, as a socially cooperative species, we do work together. And I'm not sure about World War II really starting violence, but I think from what I've seen...
Oh yeah, that was
my opinion.
Sorry.
Yeah, no, that's okay.
Conjecture.
I get what you're saying, but that was sort of the start of real high-level casualties, right? Like on a mass scale. Yeah, I think indeed. World War One was sort of... Yeah, I think World War One was the precursor to that. We started getting sort of chemical weapons, mustard gas, and things like that. But World War Two was, obviously, mass scale. But I think that
World War Two was the start of industrial slaughter. That's
right. Yeah, no, I would agree with that. But I think that's more or less the state of humans, and rather the level of technology that we could achieve what we couldn't before. But I think that humans sort of, where we have that let's be cooperative, but only in our sort of kin relationship circle. As soon as we sort of other somebody outside of it, we really can do anything we want, it seems like to me. So that whole idea of who is kin, or your sort of associated tribalistic group, and who is outside of it, appears to be purely subjective. You know, so you can even be in the same country and have, not just say Jews, for instance, but also, homosexuals or these other groups, and are perfectly reasonable people can sort of other them. But I was having a conversation that sort of, have you ever heard about stochastic voluntarism, which is the idea that you choose your beliefs kind of thing. Interesting. So it basically, do you choose your beliefs, or do you get convinced of them? Do you have control over what you believe and what you don't believe? And
It's
Ooh.
like a free will conversation as opposed to
it kind of is. It kind of is, but it's
Fascinating.
more. I come down on involuntarism, stochastic involuntarism, which basically says that you're convinced of stuff. You don't choose. Like, I couldn't choose to believe in God. I couldn't choose to think these people are on the outside. So I have to come down with the idea that you have to be conditioned in some way to believe people are outside of your tribal group. You have to have that outside influence, or maybe you convince yourself that's possible. But in some way, like, I couldn't just look at say Evan and go, hey, you're something other than me. You're not a part of my group anymore. I could do whatever I want to you, which seems to be what humans do. But if enough propaganda came down and we said people with beard, white people with beards were terrible people, that we had to do this, could I be convinced of that? And I think anybody could be. I think I don't see, say, the German people as being unusual or particularly evil or anything like that. I think that just the conditions were there that they got convinced that another people was outside of their kin circle, if you will, or their tribal group.
I actually just read a really interesting book. Hold on, I'm going to pull it up right now. It's called The History of Fascism by Robert O. Paxton. And he talks about that kind of at length, about the conditions that lead to the German people doing what they unfortunately did in World War II. And you're exactly right. It's a process of building hierarchies and deciding as like a top-down structure which one is going to essentially get the short end of the stick or go into the gas chamber, as it were.
Yeah.
And like that's from my own personal politics, like that's one of the fundamental reasons why I despise notions of like ethnicity or anything like that, because it inevitably creates the conditions for that exact problem.
Yeah, and to your question earlier, because I don't think I fully answered. When I say denature, it comes from a protein, like denaturing it in terms of an idea. Like, you're denaturing this topology in someone's head, because now, like, not only is the hard science, but the actual identity you're connected to in the society and social cohesion, and whether you want to accept that or not, that is a form of denaturing, because you've now formed a different, almost social interaction through that no longer being something you can view reality as. And so what I wanted to share with you is that, because you both brought up like these points about tribalism, and why I want your thoughts on how the salience of this is that Anthropology and sort of Rutger Bregman's book basically goes into this idea that human beings, and why I think economics is essentially tied to this, right? Because MMT says that scarcity is something that's legally instituted. So the government controls prices, and resources are naturally obtained within whatever borders you prescribe, whether that's a lack of them or not. And so what Anthropology says, if we have no evidence of human beings, causing violence to each other, like this history of us being out together in the wilderness, and we only had our animals to think about. So like, that's where maybe our phenomena comes from, of being afraid of the dark. If that was our history for so long, and we have the same software back then, because Anthropology is showing that, like, when was the first human, who was the first human, is super debated right now. Like, is it course, yeah. We're like, were the Neanderthals human? Like, it's a very hot topic now, because with genetics it's become more morphology than it is anything. Like, were they, I mean, they're just uglier, but they were probably human. But they're not.
We still have some of our DNA. The Neanderthal DNA is present in some humans, so we know that we interbred with Neanderthal.
Right. And if there's no evidence of us harming each other until this, because basically the story is that 40,000 years ago, when it got cold, the ice age happened, and that's when we see this peak of agriculture and farming. From a sociological perspective, you're thinking about communities being forced to no longer be nomadic. You're not traveling with food anymore. You're forced to be sedentary. And so, of course, there's technological booms through like this new incentive of a place that you're waiting for food. You're thinking about a lot of things, and you have a lot more time in that perspective. But also, the tribalistic tendencies spawn from this environmental aspect, not necessarily our software, right? It got cold. We're no longer walking around for our food all the time. We're not, because if you met another human species, what anthropology shows is that you just had fuck parties. People had sex with each other, drank or whatever, figured out stuff, and then met on their merry way, and then hopefully saw each other again. That's what happened when another human species met another human species group. So if that's what we see in the ground and in the evidence and in the art, because if war was common, at least at some point, somebody would have painted a picture of it somewhere. But there's no, like zero Paleolithic art that depicts human beings harming other humans. And then right when we start being sedentary, that pops up and we start making art about it too. So I think that that story of us is more of a story of technology too, and why it helps sort of denature this question of who we are, like the story of ourselves as this barbaric sort of out of Eden species. Like we are living in this turmoil that is essential to us, a fallen species, right? If it's a story of technology, right? We've lived hundreds of thousands of years always having water and food accessible as long as we walked and like shot a dart every few hours. Like if that was most of our experience of being able to eat, and then that suddenly changed and then 6,000 years of human history prior to, I mean, after farming being figuring that out, and then the 1970s. So now we're wasting food. So food for us is a scarcity problem, right? A lot of what we have, if you think about climate change, if you, like a lot of the Australian climate people that I follow talk about all the time how 90% of the climate issue is solvable right now if government just like does stuff. Planes and plastic are all we don't know in terms of actual engineering scientific problems. We don't know how to deal with plastic, and we don't know how to keep planes in the air if we want to keep flying, because big battery, too heavy to fly people. And if those are if that kind of scarcity forces us not to have to sort of wrestle with, well, do I need to war against this other community for food? We don't. That's a political choice for us, and I think that we view that center of progress as an arc or whatever. But if it's from the sociological, anthropological perspective, it's not really. It's more of a, oh, well, these creatures lost in a resource, something that they had for hundreds of thousands of years, super accessible to them, and then over the course of history, we got the technology to make it ourselves, and now we're built with all these other questions with, well, what do we do with meat and all this other stuff. But I think that that's essentially why it helps denature, because you have to accept yourself as a Christian, right, or a believer of any kind, that if human beings are essentially tied to each other through the social cohesion, and we're not tribal, right, you can't have moral rules that say that this person, for this reason that they you can't have rules that then create hierarchies that separate people based on a belief system, or God forbid, an ethnicity. And of course it's getting denatured more in first world countries, and why conservatives in our countries, yours included, are getting silly, because the public has already sort of made a decision, and we're just trickling through sort of a fading out of these ideals, I think, as we're going through integration and I don't know, these social issues just sort of being lost in the public. And that's why I think conservatives in our country have to get a little sillier with their ideals, and why the hard science doesn't matter, because Snopes versus Monkey trial, like that happened in the 1920s when it was more conservative white men than there are now making rules, where people are much more nicer and sensitive and more aware of stuff back then. But I think because we've opened up the idea of politics to a lot of people now, people have a lot more access in the Western world to that. I think that makes ultimately where these ideas come from, a conservative phenomena, easily denatured, because it's not a part of us. It's maybe, arguably, a phenomena we made up as a part of like the scarcity we experienced, and we're sort of coming out of it. And I talked so long just now, but I really want you to ask questions.
So we call that in debate a gish gallop. You covered multiple different topics.
Yeah, no, I'm bad at it.
No. That's it's just something to be aware of, because a lot of people do it to me, and they don't realize that I'm going to talk about every single topic, and sort of that's why I don't know if you saw my debate with Ronnie Cameron. He dishgulped a lot. Fought him. And then he was complaining that I kept going back to points, and it's like, well, it's a debate. What do you expect me to do?
Yeah, and I don't mind. I'm level 5 head, so.
Yeah. Our whole dynamic is that I'm kind of like the dumb one, and he goes off on tangents, and I try to bring it down.
They're definitely not. Come on, Evan, man, like seriously. You should be kind to yourself, mate. There's nothing.
Yeah.
All right. Sorry, I'm a genius.
No. You're good. It's just, yeah, I can tell there's nothing dumb about either of you. Trust me. You seem like a great pair of guys. I'd love to see you debate. You know, if you guys want to team up and debate, that I'm more than happy to. I can probably sort of get you onto modern day debate if you want. You usually do have to partner up with another person who's established already, kind of thing. James, he won't just put somebody on that he has no idea of their capabilities.
Makes sense why he hasn't responded to my emails.
Yeah, well, if he doesn't respond to a lot of emails because he gets a ton of them, but you know, you can sort of, if you sort of say, hey, I'm willing to partner up with somebody who's more established, these are the topics that I want, he'll usually sort of give you a go and see how you go, kind of thing. But yeah, to talk about it, the sort of nomadic tribes. I mean, I get that it may be the case that you know, when tribes met, all they did was have a sex party and then go off on their separate ways, kind of thing. It could also be, and sort of this occurs to me, and I must admit, I'm not, you know, I don't have a background in anthropology, so this might be wrong, but it may be that the more aggressive ones, more aggressive tribes, didn't actually survive or didn't actually produce art, kind of thing. But I think it's probably more likely that the ones that were going around attacking other tribes, you would probably see a group effort to get rid of them because they're just awful, you know, like they're horrible. But again, that sort of still does push back against that idea. Well, we're a fallen species, we're a fallen humanity that has no choice, kind of thing. The fallen state idea, which it's, you know, I try to push back on every single time. And you talked about sort of the way that these tribes interact, and I think we can, from what you said, it sounded more like we're more like bonobos than chimpanzees, kind of thing. Who are you know, chimpanzees? I mean, some I can't remember the name for a chimpanzee tribe. It's called something. I can't remember what it is. But anyway, a group of chimpanzees. Some can be very work together. Troop, thank you. They can work together, be very matriarchal and very kind to one another and supportive. And then you can get just viciously violent sort of tribes that will, you know, when a member transgresses, they'll rip them apart, kind of thing. So, but bonobos are very kind to one another. But there's also the possibility that we are our own thing, that we did diverge from chimpanzees, and we do have our own sort of social interactions going on that are unique to humans. That, you know, sort of an alien would study us, it goes, well, chimpanzees and bonobos do this, but humans are separate, kind of thing. So I think that's a possibility. Actually, one thing I want to mention you, Evan, because you mentioned that book to me, is there was a book written called The Banality of Evil about somebody in World War II. It was basically this guy at Nuremberg, and he was on trial. Basically a gas chamber attendant, essentially. You would think that he would have something different about him, something wrong, something evil. He was a normal working guy there was nothing unusual about him, nothing. He was a perfectly normal person who was just doing a job. He was just, you know, I have got to support my family, I've got to do my job. Just went out and did the most horrendous crimes, and it was basically a journalist writing about how just boring this guy was. You know, he was no evil, you know, demon that performed these things. So I wanted to recommend that because I've read that, and it is horrifying just how normal and everyday this guy is. He's just a normal worker.
Yeah, that's actually sorry, I'll hold off. Please continue.
No, go for it.
So that's like an interesting thing that we see a lot with people in like state institutions as well, where they're completely normal people. They're the most boring people in the world, but they have these positions where they make really hard decisions that they shouldn't necessarily be making. Like a great example, when I was dealing with like homelessness in my city, was that there was this guy, and his whole job was to decide like where money goes to communities. And we met with him, and he talked about how he didn't actually have any structural power. And then we were just like, you're the one who signs the bills. You can just not sign them. And it was like a mind-blowing thing for him, because like there's this thing that happens to a lot of us where we, sorry, I'm gish galloping a little bit.
No, that's okay.
As we grow up in a hierarchy, we have to kind of fit into the hierarchy, and if we question the hierarchy, it is detrimental to our health in a lot of ways. So just like by nature of the state existing, we're all being coerced into doing like awful or nothing things.
Yeah. The banality of evil, but
yeah, that sort of touches on the condition that we are to follow authority, and I believe it was the Milgram experiments where they basically have you heard of them?
I have a statement on them. They actually part of the book found why they were debunked. The Milgram experiments were actually falsified, and I can tell you why as a part of the my response.
Yeah, absolutely.
Oh, sure. So the Milgram experiment really connects to what you both just said, because the banality of evil is mentioned a lot in the book too. Because you have like Nazi signs, like you had some people who were foaming at the mouth, like with what was going on, and then you had some people who were just like listening to music, going about their day, like committing atrocities. And what sociologically, in the way that you can sort of get away from like if we're just falling barbaric creatures and like we just do that, human beings are just like that sometimes, like it's not a good answer, I think. And I think the sociological aspect helps paint why it is, because if your identity is attached to it, because what the banality of evil sort of didn't hit at, but like is expanded upon now, is that people do the bad because they're convinced of the good. So when you grow up in a social identity where you're accepted in this, and you have friends and communities that are doing the same thing, you view it, until someone conflicts and pushes against that identity to make you question it and fight against it, you view what you're doing as good. So it's more of almost this switch that we do to our brains through the social context we create that creates this, and it helps sort of, I mean, it doesn't answer the question of like this person is like doing these things, but it helps say, I think the reason it's hard is because it puts the onus on us, right? Because for the Germans, their perspective was, okay, this is viewed as a normal thing in society. And I think for them, I think they did a relatively interesting job of like making sure the society was thinking about that and constantly being aware of it. And from my perspective, the immigration that's been allowed there, considering what had just happened, is just an example of how you, as a society, are able to sort of address those things, because it's for me attached to identity. And why I think it's important for American Christians is because the American identity is something still being formed. And similar to, like, I think a lot of Western identities, what does an American, an Australian, a British person, Canadian look like? Like those questions about what we look like because of the transatlantic slave trade and these identities we formed now coming apart allows sort of like a conflict between your Christian identity, because what's more important, laws and morals that say that you and me and someone that's from China gets equal participation in this government together regardless of our religion, or that we get to have it by your book? Which is more important for your identity? Which one are you willing to double down on and get elected officials to have and support and make that happen? And like, people aren't as willing to double down on that as much.
Well, you'd be surprised. I have met people. Yeah, I've met people that are like, well, obviously, the government that we have, democracy, etc. But I also have met theocrats who believe that the Christian structure should be in charge and they should, govern the country with, according to God's laws. I've seen that. And then you get into some of the Muslims with Sharia law, and they honestly believe that Sharia law should be laid down, and that the Islamic clergy should be in charge, kind of thing. So yeah, you'd think that nobody would say, hey, we should have a theocracy, but when you start to go through some of the people that I've met, some are actually in favor of that, which is kind of horrifying.
Which is why I think it's so empowering, because the theocracy if you accept the theocracy, then you have to, what I see in those debates a lot is when they double down on like, well, this is how like Hakikachu, I think you've debated once, I'm not sure if you have, I've seen you debate a few Muslim scholars before, but like the doubling down on this is how law should be, I think is super fun to, because once people get there, right, the hard science is over. There is now an identity, sociological, political attachment that is up sort of conflicting. So I think that's why if you add atop the anthropological perspective of like who we are, you don't think you're a bad guy. Do you not think we should live in a society that has these freedoms? And then if you don't, like, why? And then connecting it to these far right, I don't know, like phenomena, I think is very, very good, and it brings these people on the defensive. I've seen you do it a few times actually, to when people like double down on religion just being a part of this conspiracy. Yeah, I've seen you do some really hard pushes, and I think that could be a lot easier too as a person of color, because you're really saying too that I can't be we've done this before, to say that I can't, because you're essentially saying I can't be a part of the system, right? And like you've already lost that public fight. Like the public doesn't support you, so like why should the public like go back to something that we've moved from? Do you want to be like the slave traders of old? Is that what you prefer as a system of?
Sorry, go ahead.
No, go ahead.
That's actually a question that I have a lot about people who advocate for theocracies, is like, what policies are you actually pushing? Because a lot of times what they talk about is like the current culture war, whatever. So like right now they're often talking about like abortion rights and stuff. What's your like actual overall world prescription? Like when you think of the perfect world, what are you imagining? And like that's the thing that always really kind of like breaks my brain a little bit, is when they try to go into it, they describe like a hellish existence, and I don't understand why they do that, or like why they fall into that.
My last debate, I had somebody who was, a moral absolutist. So they believed that the morals in the Bible and pronouncements in the Bible should hold under any circumstance, including into modern day. So he was sitting there saying that gays should be stoned to death with a smile on his face. It was quite frankly frightening. It was horrifying. Because we know that these kind of things are demonstrably harmful for society. Even slavery is demonstrably harmful for society. You'd think that, it would be good for the people who own. It's not even good for the people that own slaves. You wipe out the middle class kind of thing, having unpaid labor, because they're not able to buy anything. So it's harmful for everybody. And this is the thing, like they sort of promote these ideas as, well, because God says it, it has to be good, without actually looking at the implications. Like that person that I last debated, as I said, what he was sort of advocating for was a dystopian nightmare where Christian death squads stoned people in the street. Like you couldn't write a horror story worse than what he was suggesting, because if you implement the Old Testament and its punishments into current day society, you would have a brutal society with no tolerance for anybody else. And I think you've hit the nail on the head with your identity, your self-identity there, Kennedy. And I think that populists tap into that idea of self-identity, what it is to be American. I mean, Trump basically tapped into that hardworking, honest, says it like it is, kind of mentality that people have as their identity, religious, identity, which he has none of those things. Like he just is not any of those things. He's not hardworking. He doesn't say it like it is. He isn't religious. Let's face it, he's never been a religious figure, but he tapped into that sense of identity. And I understand your concern with the rise of these populists. It certainly does concern me as well. I think, though, that this idea, and you sort of touched on it, that we're in a bad place. I have a lot of optimism, which may or may not come across in debates, kind of thing, because I probably don't talk a lot about it. But the new generations coming up, I see a lot of optimism and hope for them. They seem very understanding of tolerance and progressiveness and things like that. The fact that you have Bernie Sanders and AOC with huge followings among young people, it gives me a lot of hope, you know, for sort of generations to come. And we are living in the best time, you know, of any time, really. We've got the best health, the best education, the best, you know, I know it looks grim because of these sort of the rise of these you know, sort of religious dictators. I would like to think it's sort of religion's last gasp, but you know, I don't know whether that's true or not. I think that religion will be around for a long time.
Can I make you
had a 2-hour-long conversation about the death of religion?
I would love to convince you that it is here, but I first want to ask a quick question. Do you know what contact theory is?
No.
No? You ever heard of that?
No.
So contact theory, Pew Research uses it a lot for how they, you know, convey how the public feels. But contact theory assumes, and it works out in the data, that basically when you're near people, you don't dehumanize them. That is the essential tool of it. So in politics around the world, you're finding that you have what is a rural city divide over like elite gerrymandering structures. So you have most people that live in cities are much more comfortable with ethnic integration, social like identity denaturing, so that like your, you know, does your Christian identity or religious identity, those things mattering less. So that city rural divide is called contact theory as an anthropological sense, and it argues that when people see each other and grow in community with each other, it denatures any ability to dehumanize the other because you see them as a part of you. And so conservatism is argued itself because anthropologically we see no evidence of this behavior until recently as a phenomena, not actually you know, we describe it as a tier. We go back and forth. There's a backlash to this and a backlash to this, versus if it's a phenomena that is fiddling out, right? And I think I focus a lot on space art as someone who's a huge fan of Star Wars, and we have I have essays that I've written about Star Wars and Star Trek and economics and how that relates to our theories and stories. And I think it's super, super important because that theory of technology hasn't really caught up with the zeitgeist yet. And I think it helps, provide that hope, because if we've already figured out socially that if an alien species came down here, we're not going to sit there, like, it's going to be extremely hard to justify that we have a God that was made in the image of us and it made them. Like the idea that Vulcans are going to come down here and we're going to say that Christ like saved you is just, it feels cringy already, and we've had it in our art to sort of illustrate when we would get there. And especially I think that's
especially if their genetic or their whatever they have for genetic structure isn't the same as ours, right? I've thought of this before. If life is somewhere else, right? There's no way you can argue that it was designed when you have another species that arose differently, right? So I just wanted to mention that,
And that's contact theory. I think is it helps sort of give, I think, this hope. And you probably feel it working in this space because what's happening is through the internet, I think, and through the way that our ability to see each other. So we've sort of forced this global contact through all of us being connected. And so now, it's just a lot harder to dehumanize someone. You can see them a lot clearer. And so having a ideology, even if you're trying to justify it as like a community being safe and sovereign and, flourishing for itself, it's a lot harder to denature that and, use war as a tactic if you see people now. And I think that that's extremely empowering as a tool. And I think sort of like when I get to people who, once you get to that space where you're like, well, I still have my view, like I've met people who are like, well, Loving versus Virginia just needs to go away. Like it's not, you know what that is, by the way? I just said that. That was the law that legalized interracial marriage in this country.
Right, gotcha. Yep.
Yeah, so I've had people like straight up debate like, well, no, that not only was that not set a law, we need to go back to making that not legal anymore. And like, basically. And doubling down on that. And it's like, well, once you get to that point with people, you can really talk to them about, well, you've lost this public fight, right? And so like, how do you expect to convince people to start harming each other? You know, how do you expect people to start hating on each other? And then what will you do with your life, knowing that like if you're not like the flat earthers or the slaveholders, right? If you don't think that you're like that, how do you think your views will be accepted if you lose this public
I've got
fight?
thoughts on that because where religion steps in, and where I think religion steps in anyway, I should be clearer. What I think is that it provides a sort of buffer where you can sort of say, well, it's not me that hates you, and it's not me that has dictated this to you. It's this other being that is not me. So it's not my fault that the being has dictated that, for instance, you know, you should be a second-class citizen or you shouldn't be able to marry, you know, between races. My book says that this being determines it. So it's kind of that separation. Because I've met people that are sort of atheists or you know, people who don't believe in God should be burned in the public square, but they'll have a conversation with you and you can tell that they don't hate you at all. They're not sort of like, oh, well, I think you're horrible kind of thing. They'll talk to you. But at the same time, they're happy with the idea that you should be tortured for eternity. And they think that that's perfectly justified, which is it's very strange. It's a very weird disconnect when you're talking to somebody who advocates your torture, but has no problem with you apart from that. And it's not because of what they think. They're fine with you. It's the God that hates you. So it's this very, very weird thing that they don't consider themselves the same because it's not them. It's their God that's determined this. And I think that's the disconnect they have. Economics and Star Trek is...
Sorry. What do you think the good way to push back against that? Because like I feel like there should be a rhetorical trick to place that responsibility back onto the person who's espousing that. Because that's kind of like an insane idea that you would have. Like, oh, I'm not responsible for the things that I put in place. This book says so.
And that's what I think that it help. I think there is a way that sociologically you can do that, and that's why I want your thoughts to help me and help us like formulate that.
You kind of have to push back on the idea that it's just their interpretation of this one book. Like there's no there's a myriad of Christians with a myriad of different beliefs out there, and nearly all of them don't believe this stuff. They don't believe that you should segregate races or you should do these awful things. So it's not the book itself. It's their interpretation of it that's the problem. So I think you've got to start with that, sort of go, well, you don't know for sure, but it's incredibly difficult because the whole idea, especially the evangelicals who believe they have a personal revelation, it's an unfalsifiable statement. You can't demonstrate that they didn't have this personal revelation kind of thing. So it's incredibly difficult.
Well, can you tell me what you think about these two lines of argument?
Sure.
The one being, if someone gets to that point, I guess trying to find because I've found like with personal relationships and other debates that I've had offline, that first of all, like creating an aesthetic of like how the universe can still be beautiful and like have meaning, and maybe even like your deity, so like Jesus having like meaning in your life morally without the supernatural aspects. So the sort of like because what I found is like, as someone I love Star Wars and Dragon Ball Z, like, and there's definitely emotional like ethereal connections that I have, but there's no community politically like that's affecting that. But it could be that there's nothing with physics that would make that impossible. It just doesn't happen. And so like it helps me think of like with people like that, providing that the world can be beautiful without these things. And then also for the ones who don't like just fully accept that there has to be this hellhole that is reality, like if that's wrong, like do you care at all that you might be causing harm with that? Like really trying to push that you, especially if they're I think if they're from the Western world, I think that's extremely hard, because mostly from my opinion, I think that if you're espousing those views, you don't actually believe them, because you don't live in the Western world with the, because we have access to all of this stuff, all of this freedom. right, and actually believe in the things that you espouse, because you wouldn't move to a country where you were a minority in it. And so I think that knowing that like some of those views are actually, they're not really, I think personally, tied to religion. They're tied to politics. They're tied to people who feel like their white Christian identity or their black Christian identity, whatever Christian identity, is being denatured by these social things that we're dealing with. Like I've seen you talk to people about transgenderism, like in the ways that like these social debates that the left hasn't taken hold of with political power in any of our countries is sort of just being fiddled out in our work. And I think that's really a part of why we do what we do, because that work is not being done with political power. And why I'm like, yeah, I just try to go through those two lines of debate. So do you think that, yeah, the social identity about it being harmful, and then also like, here's how the work can be beautiful, are, how do you think about those lines of argument for when you get to that point with people?
So it depends on the person you're talking to. As you've said before, sometimes their identity is so rooted in what they are, which is a God-fearing Christian or Islamic, sort of a messenger of Allah that is on earth, that there is no, like, they will not. It's more a Machiavellian thing. Like yes, there may be harm on this world, but this world doesn't really matter. It is just a precursor to the next world, so it doesn't, it's not something, as long as I follow God, then I will get to the next world kind of thing. And that's incredibly difficult to deal with, because they don't see this world as something that can be harmed or sort of, and going back to something you said earlier with global warming, it's very odd to meet people that just don't care, because they don't think it can happen with the God watching over them. And even if, sort of the end of the world happens or the end of humanity happens, it's just a precursor to something else. And trying to get them to understand, well, if you don't believe a God's coming to save you, that is horrifying. But they do, and their identity is so caught up with it that they will never, ever change their minds at all. Like, they just won't. When I'm in a debate, I am not trying to convince the other person. Right. The people I'm speaking to is the audience.
Right. Of course.
People have said before, you go over things that are relatively simple, that, the other person doesn't know them. Why do you go over them? And I'm like, I'm not going over them for the other person I'm debating against. It's for the audience, so they can understand. And you want to sort of appeal to the lowest common denominator. So it's important to realize that you're going into a debate not to debate the other person. It's to give the audience a perspective, because you'll never convince the other person. They are so deeply set in that mind frame. They're
right. What do you think those lines of arguments are salient for an audience? That's what I should have said. Because I've planned on, like, I would love to talk to some of the most right-wing people I can, because I think having those debates heard for the audience for the first time, like someone who's going to be willing to sit with, okay, you're in this hellhole with me, but like you're an American, right? Like, you're still voting with me. So you're tied to me through the social acceptance. And unless you're trying to take some other country or leave somewhere, you're stuck here with me. And so are your kids and your offspring. So what are you going to do about the fact that you're losing? Because I'm still here.
Well, I think that argument is a knockout for something like Pascal's wager, where it's sort of...
I didn't think about that.
You've got nothing to lose if you just believe in God. And there's other ones to attach to that, like when I was talking about stochastic involuntarism, that you just make yourself believe something. But also there is a negative for believing in God when you're wrong, because and you can also link it to the idea that when you have God as an answer, when God is your answer to any problem, scientific inquiry kind of stops. If we're going to say, hey, God created the universe, why would we continue to look for an explanation for the universe? Why would we, follow this? And a lot of Christians, they don't stop looking. They want to understand God's handiwork, but there's a lot that says, hey, we should just stop because it's just all God. And that's another one that can sort of go, well, that's a consequence of religion. And as sort of a general thing, I guess it could work. I think that it would be much better aimed at something like Pascal's or which is better for society, religion or secularism or atheism
Yeah.
kind of thing, and you can sort of say, hey, well, religion's got these things where they don't necessarily admit or acknowledge the consequence of ignoring certain problems, because those problems are antithetical to their worldview. They don't think those problems can be a problem in their worldview. So that can certainly work as well. But a lot of it is, and I was talking about sort of their identity. Sorry, I sort of lost my train of thought. But yeah, it's very strange that their identity is so rooted in this idea. But I guess we all have ideas that our identity is rooted in. And you brought up trans people, for instance. Like, it's weird that you'll see these people that sort of are, trans people should literally be shot, but then they'll talk to them, kind of thing, and have a perfectly reasonable conversation. I think I just looked at the chat before. I think Liberty Twitcher was asking which religions are the bad ones. I think that I'm not technically an anti-theist. I think people should be able to believe anything they want. I think that if you want to believe that stuff, I don't think it's good, but I don't have a right to tell you otherwise. However, when you start to legislate your religion based upon nothing but your personal beliefs, I think we've got a problem then. So I think any religion that is lobbying the government, trying to get them to change legislation to their personal beliefs, regardless of the harm that comes out, I think that is a bad religion. And that includes stuff like Scientology and, all the Catholicism, all the religions lobbying. I think that religions like, I think they shouldn't be allowed to lobby the government and try and implement their personal beliefs, kind of thing.
Yeah, and tell me what you think about this, because I had my wife has studied religious sociology, and so as someone who's never believed, roots in Star Wars were the earliest memories I had. So there was no God that could fit, even though I grew up in a Christian background and I went to Jesuit school, and I still admire Jesuit education as being a profound institution for learning, and it helped me recognize, because from their perspective, they were very comfortable with the idea that just God is this deist. God is oozing everywhere. Doesn't really affect politics. Doesn't really affect your life if you want to argue it. Doesn't really say anything about evolution. We can accept that too. And it really helped me understand that if God can be that malleable for people at a certain point, and I had a roommate who was Hindu who fully believed in the Big Bang, and was kind of certain about the big crunch, not the big crunch, but what's it called, the big bounce. So that the theory that the universe rebounded, and was well, scientifically, this is what I think has the best evidence for reincarnation. And I was well, that has nothing to do with reincarnation. And we just got into an argument of semantics at that point, because if you're using religious words to prescribe scientific theories, but you don't disagree with the scientific theories, then it feels to me like we're getting into it. If we agree on the same politics, right? You don't think that this anthropomorphic God should be organizing anything with my life, and you still think it should have a pluralistic, I don't know, you should still live in a pluralistic society with that. Sure. It makes me sort of feel like the people who are debating that kind of thing, the people who are holding those ideas and then still willing to talk to someone, they don't really hold those ideas. I truly think that a lot of people, it's because only 20% of politics is really pushed by the people who are really, really engaged in it in our societies anyway. And I think evangelicals are super, super politically involved, whether they admit that to themselves or not, around the world. And because that's being, destroyed through contact theory and integration, I think it makes sense to me why that you're able to just talk to someone and not really hold any harm in your heart, because I think your identity is sort of blocking you from that. Even though you can hold the love or whatever, you just can't accept that. Well, I think some people I've even heard will use the pronouns, but just won't accept that this person is a woman. So give all sorts of social respect, accept the laws that need to happen, but just in their hearts will not accept the identity. And I think that's when, I think when a person starts to get to do that, it's a little hard too, because you have to sort of, I think, see where that person's coming from, and then in relation to the audience, and sort of dig out their own personal vulnerabilities to that topic. But that for me, I feel like is, yeah, really hard for me to engage with, because I feel like people aren't. Yeah, it feels like it's incumbent for us as streamers to do this work, but it really is because the public already accept this idea. We've won the battle. You can't harm trans people without people feeling like that's wrong, right? So it's already been accepted politically, in the zeitgeist, but it just hasn't come through with political power and law. And when that happens, there's nothing that's it, right? No one, you can't politically get active about telling women they can't vote anymore. You can still say it sometimes, but like you're not organizing around that, no matter how hard you try anymore. So that's sort of how I think about that sort of identity. But I don't think it's hard for me to engage with Christian identity in that way, because I feel like it's not talked about as a conflicting, like religious identity itself is a conflicting identity to any heterogeneous nation or community that you want to be a part of. Like you can't have people be accepted politically at the same time. Like one of those ideas will conflict whether you like them or not.
Well, the whole idea of, you sort of said deists at a certain point you don't think that they believe that. I step back from doing that. I generally will acknowledge people to have the beliefs that they say they have. Yes, because the problem is that you can never tell what somebody actually believes. Even if it's contradictory, you can believe contradictory things. It causes cognitive dissonance, but people certainly can. So when it comes to beliefs, and I'll certainly sort of say, as far as deism or any God belief, I don't believe it's true, and you sort of have to separate. Well, you have to separate ontology, which is metaphysics, that's what actually is, from epistemology, which is belief or knowledge. So I simply sort of have a rule that if someone says they believe it, I will act in accordance, because I've got no way to actually examine what they believe for certain. And the problem that I encounter a lot is sort of Christians going, well, you're not really atheist. You just believe that you do believe in God. You're just pretending you don't, or you're suppressing you don't, or, and sort of telling you what you believe. And the outcome that I see is atheists sort of saying, you can't possibly believe that, you don't believe that. And theists sort of saying, hey, you do believe in God. And then we basically just have two sets of people not believing what each other believes, basically. They're just saying, hey, you're lying. So I see the outcome as bad, and I see the way to establish that as sort of lacking, because no one can see inside another's head. I cannot second guess somebody when they say they believe something. And then you get stuff like Poe's law. I don't know if you've heard of that one. It's famous throughout the internet. It's basically there is no belief crazy enough, or no sort of belief crazy enough that it could not be mistaken for a troll. Because you get people with these beliefs that are out there, and many a time I've thought, this person cannot possibly believe that. And upon talking to them for a bit, you go, oh, they do believe that. That is exactly what they believe. It does happen.
Well, tell me what you think about... Oh.
No, that's okay. And you sort of said, as streamers, it's incumbent on us. And I'm not sure what your motivations are, kind of thing. I get you're sort of doing a bit of activism, a bit of community organizing, and you want to sort of generate a community around you to sort of push back on these ideas, kind of thing. I get that. I got into it simply because I like debating. I enjoy it. I like talking with people and really having a logical exchange and really attacking their ideas and having mine attacked. And nothing gives you a better understanding of your viewpoint than having to defend it. Having to say, hey, this is why I believe it. And be open to, hey, if this doesn't make sense, I'm going to drop it. Like you really do drop things that you're like, well, maybe I don't have a good reason for this. And, all of these other things, you're like, no, I do stand by, because I can explain it to somebody. So I don't have an override. I admire your goals in trying to organize community and stuff. I have not. That was never my intention. Mine was sort of a more accidental thing that I got started in. But I don't think it's incumbent on you. I think that you I have problems with the word should, right? I have
Yeah,
problems with
and
that.
I don't mean I should rephrase. I don't mean that it's incumbent on us. What I mean is that like basically the failure of the left to gain political power in all of our countries, because our views are usually, I think, accepted in the public if they're wrestled with legally. Like people don't want to accept theocracy in terms of like a majoritarian perspective, I think,
Right,
at least
right.
in Western countries. And so what I mean by that is like because the left has not like pushed the laws to establish these things politically, it basically trickles down and then forces us to have these debates through the lack of their engagement as elected officials, if that makes.
Right.
But I wish it was not. I wish I could just be doing music and like cell-based science and not have a
Yeah.
reason to do like. But I love debating and I think about these topics a lot. And like the reason I want your thoughts on like the because you
Well,
said
I
the
think, sorry to interrupt you, Kennedy. I think it would be helpful to reframe it as in you want to do this. This is something that you want, and that's a big part of going into this sphere. If
oh
you're
yeah.
just, I've seen so many people go, well, I have to do this. This is something I have to do, and they can't maintain it. It's not maintainable.
Oh yeah, I don't
It's,
feel like I have to.
you
I
know,
want to a lot.
yeah. So there's this whole idea of it's incumbent upon no one will care if you've got nothing to say and you don't do it. If you
Hmm.
want to do it, that's the driving force that this is something that I want to do, even for yourself, because I'm basically doing this for myself. I never expected to become any kind like I honestly like months ago I was basically I don't need a YouTube channel. I don't care kind of thing, and people literally pressured me into making a channel, and just, what happened? I don't know. I'm just here now. I have no idea, but I'm enjoying it. Don't get me wrong, but I want to debate people, and sort of test ideas against them, test their ideas.
Mhm.
That's what I want to do, and that's what I want to do. So that's
Yeah.
cool.
I'm hoping that like and I want you to push back. I love some of the pushback you've given me and sort of the help that you provided today because it's been really really helpful and I want to be able to network so that we can sort of figure out how we can get our faces in these debate streams because I would love to be a part of it. But the question I would ask is sort of if you're talking to someone and the sort of the sociological questions come up when I'm considering that okay I'm in this place where me and this person aren't meeting in terms of seeing reality the same. I guess yeah, in that moment, do you think it's still important to, because I basically have this perspective that you can assume I mean, Pew Research and a lot of data that I could back this up on, the more someone
Right.
believes in religious tenets, the more conservative their politics are going to be. Like you
Usually,
can,
yes, yes.
with almost a 90% like rate, you can get sort of a test where people's political assumptions are going to be with how much they follow the tenets of like if they're more deist and it's just God can be whatever they want and they don't want, you can see more
Mhm.
leftism through that identity. And that's for all religions. And
Sure.
because,
Yeah.
and so what I've found sociologically interesting is that, I don't know, if you can push people to notice that they have to compete with, these identities these things that they want in their lives for religious reasons versus what they want in their personal lives socially. If
Mm.
do you still want access to the same marketplace and the sort of the same things that America as a country that it doesn't matter what you look like, increasingly you can be a part of a political institution and hopefully some other countries start to do that so it's not just us in Canada and Australia and Europe. And maybe some other countries can start doing this too. If that can be like a sort of a way like okay we've lost the scientific argument but and now we're just sort of talking to each other getting the audience to pull it.
Well, you're talking unequal worldviews, right? So you're talking about when you're coming from different worldviews, and you sort of put it very, very well that when your worldview and their worldview are just so disaligned, how do you actually broach that? How do you get to them? And
Yeah.
one way you described was practicality. So what does a scientific worldview bring? what does a religious worldview bring, and you can appeal to practicality. The problem with that is if they're, and not all theists do this, but if they're the type that says, well, theists invented science, therefore science is religious kind of thing. They sort of dismiss their worldview as being part of theirs, and sort of, like Kent Hovind, for instance, he will claim that he's using science, right? And that he loves science and loves this, but he's not using, his understanding of science is abysmal at best. But so how do you bridge that divide? I've usually found that you've got to go back to foundations. So you've got to go back to, okay, so how logically can we tell which methodology we're using and which methodology is going to produce the best results? So you've got a methodology where you believe something on faith, and I've got a methodology that relies on the scientific method, rationality and reason and kind of things like that, which is going to produce the best results. And we can examine that. I use it as sort of explaining methodology. I use it an example of when you're crossing the road, in traffic. Getting empirical data, looking left, looking right, listening, that is a better methodology than believing on faith that you're going to make it and just crossing the road. Right, one methodology is superior to the other. So you've got to go back to very, very basic foundations and things that you do agree on. Logic, rationality, reason. You'll very seldomly find somebody pushing back against these things. If you have to go back that far, sometimes it's necessary to go back to the laws of logic, the law of identity, the law of non-contradiction, the law of excluded middle. Sometimes you have to go down to the very bare bones of empiricism. Are our senses correct? And even then you will get something like a presup, who are nightmarish to deal with, basically say, no, all of that comes from God, and you will not agree on the foundation. And at that point, you sort of have to go, well, there's, I don't accept that, and there's nothing, I keep having this guy show up who requires you to agree there's a God before continuing a conversation.
Who is that?
The biblically guy, I can't forget. He's calling himself Ultimated Judeo-Christian or something.
Yep, I've seen. Yeah.
Right. So where do you go when you go down to the very foundation? Because basically this precept idea is God is responsible for all intelligibility. Right. So anything that you think or can reason or speak or even consider is a result of God, and you've got to agree to that before he'll go onwards. Well, you can't go onwards from there. If that dude specifically, it's just, you can go straight. I feel like you could go straight to the anthropomorphic God when, like, you're just posing this whole view of human beings being so special, and I don't know, and that's where I feel like in a case where you just harp on, or one could just harp on the human beings being special fallacy, or if that even is a fallacy. I don't think that it is. Is there an anthropomorphic fallacy, if I remember correctly? Yeah, I believe so. It's sort of like the idea that humans have exceptional qualities, because we do, but we like, so humans are, we obviously have big brains, we're good at communication, but there's other animals that have special qualities. A bear is much stronger than us. That you're basically taking human qualities and saying they're special because you specifically have them. And that's the sort of anthropomorphic fallacy. There's nothing in nature that says that intelligence is particularly that useful. It's not really useful for most animals, not the higher intelligence that we see out of birds, for instance, and other scavengers, where intelligence may be useful. It seems like a waste of resources in most cases in evolution. But I guess once you get to a certain point, it's wildly successful, obviously, because humans have used it successfully. But the whole idea that we're special because of it is a bit of a problem.
Yep.
Because many times I've said that bacteria is way more successful than humans, to the point that humans rely on bacteria to survive.
And what you said earlier too, with the alien life form, like it doesn't break physics to imagine a species having different DNA. We just haven't found them yet. So it within the logic itself, knowing that we've already worked out that this is a phenomena that clearly exists within the universe. We just haven't found it. You can't have both those things exist.
Well, you run into the Fermi paradox, unfortunately, which sort of says that with the vastness of the universe, it's almost certain that life exists. But the paradox is that with the vastness of the universe, it's almost certain they're never going to contact us, and we'll never see them. So that's the paradox.
Yeah, and I follow the because you know that it changes like so much too, because people that I love following like different depictions of when the Fermi paradox changes, because now with the Hubble telescope, for example, with being able to detect atmospheres, like how we can use, but that equation keeps changing when our technology keeps changing, and figuring out like how much it would make sense for life forms to be doing that as we engage with it socially too. So I love the Fermi paradox too, because it also helps just destroy the idea that you could have human beings being basically made in the image of God, imago Dei, can't work unless you accept maybe the idea that aliens too are made in the image of God, which gets, I think, a little weird.
It gets a bit. But you know, and all of these things are sort of provided by science. This is the reason I'm making these. No one's praying for this stuff to happen. You know, no one's praying for answers of you know, do atmospheres occur on other planets, kind of thing. But we're using science to do that, and that's sort of the important point, that it's science that is propelling our everything. Like, you know, it's kind of weird because you're talking to somebody who is basically denying science, and some people will deny it outright. They'll kind of go, well, science doesn't know anything, it relies on faith, it makes assumptions that you know, sort of, so when you're talking about imperialism, you sort of have to use an assumption there, or a presupposition that you know, that the reality is real and that your senses are sort of correct for a given level of accuracy. But they'll sort of go, well, science doesn't know anything. And it's like, you're sitting on a computer talking to me now, over the internet, and you're denying that science is effective, basically. It's a very weird sort of feeling to have when you're seeing somebody use the fruits of science to deny that science works. And so that's a really good one to point out when it's sort of the science denying crowd. But there's nothing incompatible with science and God. Hell, there's nothing incompatible with evolution and God. Evolution doesn't disprove God. It doesn't do that at all. It only explains biodiversity. So if you want to, and I've met plenty of Christians that say, hey, God started the whole process. Well, sure, I don't believe that, but it's perfectly compatible with evolution. There's nothing about evolution that disproves that.
Yeah, so I used to have a friend back in high school who, I think he went on to be a zoologist, actually. He argued that, like, evolution is real, and the reason why it functions is because God uses it as a tool. Like, that's the tool that God uses, or whatever.
Yeah,
which, like,
and
makes sense if you imagine that, like, if you have this omnipotent being, then time is something that it exists outside of, right?
Well, I think the personhood debate is a little denatured by evolution, which I never got, because I thought I first got into anthropology with sociology, because I couldn't understand how you could have an understanding of evolution and even the Big Bounce and then still hold God in your head. And I think in my thought, I just feel like a lot of people, because in the Scandinavian countries or the Nordic countries, it seems to be common that like Christianity still has like a cultural attachment. No one believes in, I think it's, I forget Zimmerman's book on the God theory, but he talks about how like culturally there are political attachments to Christian identity through like the moral system, but no one believes in God. No one is walking around talking about how God needs to be organized, but God still has an influence on their cultural beliefs. People get married in a church still and stuff. And so the ways that people can still be attached to it without the beliefs always makes me feel like, well, you've now accepted that God has no personhood though, right? Like that's why I try to harp on with people when they go there. Like if you're not in I think of it as two camps. If you're in the camp that's, I'm denying reality, likely for a political reason, because my social hierarchy needs to rule the world, that's one space. And then if you're I don't believe God does those things, but I do think that the universe needs to probably have some design because there's too much beauty and complexity for me to get it. That part I think is different because you can, I don't know, you want, I feel like once people I don't think people in that camp accept that they no longer view God as having personhood. Like there is no made in the image of God under that view. Like God can be a,
So,
if God can be a particle, then God can be something that exists outside of time, but that type of universal entity has no bearing on our politics, on our morals,
right.
because then that God rules the sun, and he made a deadly universe where the, where it's a laser that's out here trying to burn
Yeah,
us all
yeah.
the time. So it's
Well,
not it, the personhood goes away.
yeah, but I mean, the whole point about sort of Sweden, Scandinavia, and yeah, they do have these sort of Christian traditions, and I think you've got to separate um, what people do traditionally from their beliefs, and a lot of them don't believe in God, but they still go to church and they enjoy the community of it, and that's fine.
Mm-hmm.
Like I've got no problem whatsoever with that. Um, the whole idea about traditions is sometimes they are just comforting to us. We do them because people before have done them, and it provides us a link, a kind of a feeling that we're connected to past things that are being repeated. So people go back to the same traditional festivals and traditional
Mm-hmm.
things to feel like they are connected to, maybe their ancestors who have come before them, or a segment of the population they feel they identify with. So I don't see anything. I don't have any problem with that. I really don't. I think that people should be able
Mm-hmm.
to enjoy whatever traditions, as long as it's not hurting anybody else, and whatever traditions and festivals and things like that they want to. And if they want to get married in a church, have at it. It doesn't affect me. Don't care. Um, I don't see it as being sort of untrue to themselves or something like that. I just don't. I think it's when people don't believe and sort of say they do,
Mm-hmm.
that sort of it's kind of annoying. But I just see it as, well, if you want to sort of lie to yourself, that's entirely your prerogative. It doesn't really upset me at all.
Mm.
Um, you mentioned something else as well, and I didn't write it down. I'm sorry. Yeah, so that doesn't bother me in the slightest. I'm fine with that. If people want to, keep Christian traditions alive and they don't believe it, look, it doesn't even bother me if people do believe in Christianity. Oh, you were talking about deism, that's right. So when you basically take the idea of God away from a personhood and sort of make it into a deist concept. Well, the first part is, how do you know it exists at all if it doesn't have any influence on society?
Right.
Deists generally think that it's not a personal God, so it doesn't communicate with you. It doesn't involve itself in the universe at all. So how do you actually know it exists at all if it doesn't have any influence on the universe at all? It's indistinguishable from a God that just doesn't exist.
Mm-hmm.
But I mean, I don't really have a problem with that one if they want to believe that a God did all of that, or a God's a particle or whatever. I don't have a
Mhm.
huge problem with it. It's just, yeah, they're pretty innocuous. It's more,
Agreed.
yeah, it's more the ones sort of trying to legislate against the trans and the gay communities that I have a massive problem with. I really get a bit up in arms about.
Yeah, both are confusing, but I feel like I guess I can work with the others since politically sometimes I'm aligned with them more than even some atheists that don't believe in, immigration or transgenderism and end up fighting with that. That I've found is very fascinating. But
Were there just
yeah,
Islamophobes? Because I guess that happened in the atheist community at some point.
Yeah,
yeah, and I
yeah.
mean like they deserve. I mean, especially as a black person, I'm like.
Hmm.
I don't even know what tribe I came from, like, was because Islam got there too. So I
Right.
like before the transatlantic slave trade. So like it's very deep for me, but I don't. It would, especially I'm from Detroit originally, so like
Right.
knowing that the Muslim community has always been there, and like tons of people just did, played Yu-Gi-Oh! Dragon Balls they didn't believe, just like I did. It was really hard for me to see how like the cultural aspects of how some people still attach to it was still problematic, and I just
Hmm.
because I was like, well, these people don't, some like Jewish people sometimes don't even believe in God at all. They just are attached to the
Right. Right.
cultural like history that they are part of, but like there's no God there. Moses was just a moral story. Like none of that's attached, and people can do that.
Yeah.
And yeah, I think that that's sort of why it feels like the identity being denatured by another conflicting identity, which is whatever like American or Western identity that's being formed that allows our borders to let anyone that looks like anything, as long as they speak our language, sort of be here and gain political power. That whatever that identity is that has not yet been solidified, I think is what's conflicting with religious identity ultimately, because I don't think most people want to accept the alternative and are much more comfortable, regardless if they're what side of they're debating, in the way that things are now. That's where I think people aren't willing to do, where people are, where I guess people don't really believe it. People are faking it sort of for a political argument, where I don't think people are willing to actually double down on wanting to have like that society if they lose that political vote. Like, should we have what if you don't, what if you're on the other side of it? Like, so that, yeah, that's my main focus, but I've taken up a lot of your time here. So I hope you have so many other like questions to ask us. And
well, I'm a bit of a weird one. I think that I personally think that humans should be global, and if that makes me a globalist, that makes me a globalist. And it was interesting that you sort of the economics of Star Trek, and I sort of see it as the politics of Star Trek kind of thing, like all humans working together for a cause kind of thing. I think that countries are arbitrary; they're just things that we've designated, and that perhaps it is possible, I'm not saying this will happen, but it's possible that one day we might all need to work together to ensure our own survival. And, when you think about where the world is, it's basically spinning at a rate of knots, flying through the Milky Way with, asteroids zooming left, right, and center. Back in 2019, there was an asteroid called OK 2019. It nearly hit Earth, and it was big enough to cause an extinction of everything on Earth, and it's like a bullet hitting your sleeve. And we're arguing about the pettiest stuff, this really petty, who gets this land. It's like, yeah, I think that's where I would love to see the world go, as a sort of, solidified human species supporting each other and surviving in a insanely hostile universe, insanely so. And I guess that's why I brought up the whole idea that religion says, well, that will never happen. And it's like, well, there's nothing in my worldview that says that an asteroid couldn't hit us and just, wipe out all life on Earth, not just humans. Probably some bacteria would survive, but,
we should definitely plug. Oh.
Sorry, Kendi?
Oh, sorry, sorry I interrupted you.
No, that's cool. There was a bit of a delay. I'm in Australia, of course. So. I'm sorry for being upside down. I'm sorry. That's my fault.
Yeah, you're in a beautiful place. I'm jealous. Yeah, I would love to plug some like any resource recommendations too, because I think the way that first of all, globalists, you accept it and be fine with it. And I would love to plug with a book, P.O. Hansen, A Modern Migration Theory. I'll send that to you. So he's a person that wrote about open borders from the perspective of the Scandinavian countries and then expanding it out. And then he uses MMT, so modern economics, that theory, to say how it's not going to be economically harmful. But then anthropologically, he touches on it a little bit about how it's not new. Like the idea that like we have a globalist society from the anthropological perspective, if we were all nomadic, constantly living without borders, then like what we're doing now is not new. And then in 500 years, it's not hard to imagine that the trajectory of the last 10,000 years is viewed as like this arc of human history where we were doing this thing and then we stopped doing that thing. We're not, that's sort of how I feel, and why I don't think that it's sort of some people describe it as like this new perspective coming on. Like we're trying to, like people that believe that ethnic identity and borders should sort of not be a driving force for how we do, community. You should be able to maybe theoretically be able to work anywhere and live anywhere, have a job anywhere. Like
participate in those elections anywhere you go.
Right. And if
you are a part of that demographic, you should be able to vote there.
Right. And if that doesn't feel bad to a lot of the people in the Western world. It's probably, if anthropologically it helps if we're not doing something like new ourselves, if we're just more free from the scarcity and the technology to go back to something, if that makes sense.
Mhm.
Like a way of not really having to worry about borders, especially now that we see the world. There's so much to see. No one wants to. I mean, I want so badly to go to Australia to pick up a job and live 2 months in Australia would be a dream.
Well, I must admit, like I would love to see stuff like Colorado and stuff like that. America scares me a little.
Don't come here.
I think, look, the Americans that I've met from the Midwest have been just gorgeous people, right? The people are actually one of the things where I'd really like to go and see, you know, the Eastern Seaboard and the West Coast kind of thing, San Francisco and Colorado, and the nature is amazing. But the whole idea of people just wandering around with guns is to me.
Just had 5 shootings yesterday. Three of the mass.
Right. It's really weird that like if I saw somebody on the street with a gun over here, it would be people running away and, you know, just it would be such an unusual sight. It's so strange. You know, it's really weird. People talk about open carry and stuff, and I was just sitting here going, how the hell do you feel safe? Like,
we don't is the answer.
That's the problem, because somebody was sort of talking to me, and they're like, "What, you know? Don't you guard your house and worry about someone breaking in and killing you?" And I'm like, no, not at all. Like, I don't. That doesn't cross my mind.
I like my neighbors.
It's just, you know, it's sort of, yeah. I mean, it's not like Australia is you know, everybody does the right thing. There's still break-ins, there's still murders and stuff, but you know, I view it like you view getting eaten by a shark. Yeah. You know, I just, yeah. So this whole idea, because, you know, there's no guns over here. Nobody has a gun. The only person I know with a gun, and that's my brother, and only because he's a police officer, because he had a gun. That's the only reason. So nobody owns guns over here. We're happier than ever.
Australia's doing great work. I'm very.
Look, US is different. It's a different culture. It's a different thing. But when you've got like 75% of the population that want greater gun control, and there is no political power to do so, something's wrong there. Something's wrong with, you know, 3/4 of the population of a democracy want something, and they can't have it. It's baffling. You can't say that you know, something hasn't gone wrong in a democracy.
Yeah.
When it's so overwhelming.
Ooh,
there's like a. Sorry, go ahead, Kennedy, and then I'll follow up.
Okay, I wanted to, like, because I forget. Yeah, I wanted to maybe add something about the American perspective that I think is unique, but also like, yeah, we need these other countries' like policies to sort of rhyme with. But I don't know. I want your perspective on this because Rowan, who is from Australia, and his father's from Britain, like, has talked to me a lot about the culture there. And I've visited Europe a few times, and it's not. I had my own experiences, so it was cool to listen. But one of the things I thought was very interesting, that America has a unique legal system that we created since 1964, when we gave black people and instituted for sure that women could vote, and that we made our politics extremely weird to pass laws. So there's a book called Why We're Polarized that goes into detail about how America, if you look at since back to Egypt, like political institutions, and compared their legal the legality of their elite structure to their populace, and like relative to revolution.
You mean their legal structure or their legislative structure?
Both.
All the above.
Okay.
All the above. And looking at that and determining, well, what was the most politically gate-kept structure. And what's very interesting is that America has found a way since 1964 to have the because in normal terms, you wouldn't get to this point without a revolution. Like, in terms of the populace not having this, you sometimes not even 50%, which is 75%, 80% for a lot of our policies. We're talking 40%. You wouldn't get to that point without a revolution in typical times. So America has this unique experience of, first of all, us being very connected globally, so we're no longer trying to do revolutions anymore, as hard as we used to, and then our identity being attached to post transatlantic slave trade. So we've had civil wars and fights over really accepting the idea that anyone can look like anything here. And I wonder your thoughts about that relative with Britain and Australia, because I think what makes America unique, and that why things are about to get very interesting but still hopeful, is that if you look at 100 years ago when we were about to do this the same, and you're seeing sort of political assassinations become more prevalent again, with what happened with Nancy Pelosi. I thought about that. I presumed that that was going to happen 2 years ago because of where things were going. Because from my perspective, when the public isn't matched up with what the politicians are doing, you're going to have, people eventually break into the system to sort of deal with it regardless. And I think because the left has already won, what's going to happen is that Democrats are going to wake up, because we're much more integrated. We won't have a Nixon response to them trying to do this. But yeah, Democrats are going to have to, and leftists around the world are going to have to notice that, oh, well, we've actually won this public persuasion battle already. We just have to do this thing through law and really establish these things and make an effort, even if we don't have majoritarian rules sometimes, to do it. And what I mean by that is like Loving versus Virginia, so interracial marriage, that passed with 42% of the population. So like that, we didn't pass that under majoritarian rule, but it was a social decision to do something that we said no to the population for, and everyone was fine with it. Like eventually, it took a few decades, but like that, and so that's what I mean is that we're walking into a space where, because the left has already won public persuasion on so much, that America's so unique, and that not letting our public get involved. We sit under the global South, like the world is sort of under our foot, while at the same time. I want your thoughts on how Australia is wrestling with its ethnic identity with that sort of problem.
Yeah, Australia has racial problems of its own. The Australian Aboriginals were basically slaughtered there, essentially the Native Americans of Australia. So they were treated horribly. I think that a lot of the government, they do try to educate. There was a lot of the Battle of Pinjarra Pines was a slaughter kind of thing. There was a lot of stuff that went on. America sort of formed out of rebellion and sort of throwing off the yoke. Australia still has this problem with imperialism and colonialism is really the word that I'm looking for. So being aware of the effects, and I think it was Lindsay Ellis who said it best, to quote a YouTuber, colonialism, the aftermath of it is baked into every single society on Earth, right? I think it's just to be aware of the way that we view some of the events of colonialism in mainstream Australia. Like Australia Day is basically the day the first fleets landed on the shores, basically. The native Australians call it Invasion Day, and I can completely understand why, and I'm completely sensitive to the idea that sort of this great event for white Australia is the biggest tragedy for the black Australians, and I do not celebrate it for that reason. I think it should be changed. I think it should be switched to when Australia federated into one country, but I'm not, I think it just should be dropped. I'm not a big patriot. As I said, I guess I'm a globalist, so I think it's pretty arbitrary anyway, but I think you have to be sensitive to how two different backgrounds will view the same event kind of thing. Yeah. And Australia's a bit weird because it's very strange because you sort of have more a class system, because some people came here as settlers and sort of took land. Some people, like most of my ancestry, arrived in chains. We were prisoners. We were convicted and sent to the penal colony that was Australia. So, just because you're black doesn't mean you didn't arrive in the country in chains in Australia. So there's sort of this understanding that not all ancestors were involved with that, but enough were that, and you have to be sensitive to these events of colonialism, the British colonies basically slaughtering people. The only documented genocide was the Tasmanian Aboriginals, who were slaughtered completely. That's an entire race gone off the face of the earth.
I didn't know that.
So, yeah,
Whoa.
it's the only recorded successful genocide in human history, because sort of Tasmania is an island off Australia. It's one of those things that
Wow.
you, as an Australian, I think that you should be aware of the past. You should be aware of the things that have happened before. And I talk a lot about guilt versus responsibility, and that as a white person, I'm not guilty for what has happened before, because I wasn't even alive. But I do have a responsibility, because I am part of the people that do have the power to make changes going forward. So I am responsible. It's like when you work in a company and someone calls in. It may not be your fault, or you're not guilty for breaking their stuff, but it is your responsibility to do something about it, right? So it's everybody's responsibility to do something about it.
Do you find that? Oh,
yeah.
Sorry.
No, that's okay. What's up?
I was just gonna say, do you find that feeling like increasingly like connected within like the Australian left or the zeitgeist of your people, that people generally are increasingly feeling like that responsibility to consider is becoming normalized?
Yes. So there was a massive backlash. Somebody proposed a Aboriginal envoy for the government, basically somebody to advise them on sensitive matters, to an official position kind of thing. So let's acknowledge that the traditional owners of this land ought to have a voice in how it goes, and ought to have a connection that they couldn't normally access, being sort of tribal in nature, because you've got to remember that they're more like the Native Americans than they are like, because the African Americans were brought in with the colonies kind of thing. So, but they were there before, so they're more like Native Americans. But anyway, they ought to have a voice in the government, and the government of the time sort of backlashed and said, no, we're going to block it, kind of thing. And just there's massive outcry happened, because that seems to be a fair thing to do, especially when you have sort of mining companies that destroy 50,000-year-old art, which happened recently, which people were furious, absolutely ropeable, as we say in Australia. So yeah, there is a feeling of reconciliation is what we're talking about. Let's reconcile what has happened with the way that we move forward together. Let's acknowledge what's happened. Let's not hide it and pretend it didn't happen, because it did, right? You can't just pretend it didn't happen and build up this cultural identity based on a lie. It will unravel. It will fall down. We do have a National Day of Sorry, basically, and the government officially apologised to the people. And that might not seem like much, but I think it's when, how would you feel, Kennedy, if the government said on behalf of all of the, people gone before us and the government before us, we are so sorry for what we did to, your people, kind of thing? It would be a huge thing to just sort of acknowledge that people coming from these backgrounds were affected so much.
Oh my God, you're giving me hope. Evan, I feel like our country is like, I already kind of assumed that Britain and Australia and Canada were like sort of pushing a little bit further than us, but they were just, smaller, so they can't control the economic hegemon behind it. But my feeling was that sort of the reconciliation of these things, because the political power of the left is a lot stronger in these countries is starting to happen a lot differently. Because I mean, you can go up to your prime minister, from what I heard at the bar, and just be like, "Hey, you." Get your stuff together. Like, you all hold your political figures as less like, you know, superpowered celebrities like we do.
That's weird. I think it's weird the way that you guys have treated the president. It's just, you know, there's multiple footages of, you know, people in Australia that prime minister goes up to him and goes, "Hey, how you doing?" And goes, like, really, just, you know, that's
amazing.
fine, you know. No, it's great. It's just the whole idea that you've got to hold this person on a pedestal because they've been elected is so strange. Mind you, I mean, we've got technically, but our constitution is terrible, like it's awful. And I mean, I'm sort of talking about the hopeful things, but the fact that there was an attempt to block this sort of native Australian envoy shows that there is the other side as well. There is enough people that don't believe the same things that I do. So it's not all, you know, everybody's on the same board, everybody's, you know, on the same page. No, there's a lot of pushback against it. But yeah, the whole idea that the president sort of sacrosanct, can't talk bad about him. I think Trump, for all of the terrible stuff he did, he kind of changed that for people in America.
For sure.
You know, because if you have to support somebody like him in order to be American, you know, what does that say about Americans? So I think a lot of people went, well, I can't support this president, you know, because before, especially, you know, the Iraq War, which Australia was complicit in as well as America. I don't, you know, make any bones about that. I remember protesting the Iraq War. It was kind of, you know, oh, well, you don't have to agree, but you do have to support the president in whatever he does, kind of thing, because that's what the country does. And I think that that mentality has been worn away by America. It's less, you know, support the president and more, he's not doing, if he's doing harm to us, why would we support him? So I have a lot of optimism because, I mean, Trump was terrible, but the one thing he did was shatter this idea that the president is infallible or you know, some way to be venerated.
I'm going to push back on that just a little bit.
Okay, not push.
So,
okay.
So, all right. So, the reason why Americans are the way that we are with our political figures ties really, really closely in with McCarthyism, which was basically a political movement in the United States that actively sought the elimination of leftist ideology. So the CIA specifically would go out of its way to infiltrate leftist orgs and assassinate its members or essentially blow them up from the inside. And what that essentially culminated into is that from the public perception, we kind of unconsciously deified our political figures. That's why we have people who their voter base like hates them, but they still get elected because deviating from that, questioning your political authority was enough to get you sent to prison.
Well, I wouldn't say
for a really long time in American history. Like,
well, I wouldn't say that. Oh, sorry. Well, you did. I wouldn't say that it. I don't know. You can push back on me on that, but I would definitely consider that, like, I mean, McCarthyism definitely had a role in like destroying the left, but I would say that like McCarthyism only existed because you had more people that, you know, denied the public basically was not in supportive of civil rights and integration for reasons prior to, because then you have to go back to Reconstruction, right? Like when you're talking about America, like and basically the Western world, where you start, like you can keep going back and forth when you're asking the why questions, and where with America specifically, I'm very much more like keen on assuming that our political institutions come from the fact that we as in Britain, America, Australia, won the Industrial Revolution, has got access to that technology first before every other country did. So it wasn't the Muslim world that became the hegemon and doing the same things that basically we were doing. It became us. And so like that's what I attribute that to. And the left not being able to basically secede past that or move past that gatekeeping was because you didn't have the public persuasion at that time. Like people did not believe in civil rights and integration because it hadn't met the zeitgeist yet. And the right was still propagandizing against that, but I think it was much. I think prior to the '60s, that's much more of a public persuasion problem, and then after the '60s, you're dealing with the public accepting these ideas globally almost, and then political institutions and legal gimmicks. Because I don't think McCarthyism, without like the fact that most white people just didn't agree with civil rights anyway, it didn't make it sort of like a salient thing that you would. It just sort of part and parcel. It feels like historically as a part of why that would happen and why now it's very unique. Conservatism itself is so unique because it's come out of this, I don't know, backlash to the left being destroyed for so long, and then we did something about it, civil rights.
Well, it's a counterculture push kind of thing.
Yeah.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. That does all tie into what I'm saying too. It's like I'm speaking specifically about why we kind of deify our political figures and don't question them, and like that's what I'm specifically talking about. But your thing also ties in with mine because the like ideology superstructure of McCarthyism really tied in well with how we gerrymander our voting districts. It basically prolonged the conservative movement in the United States and allowed it to gain the momentum that it does. Exactly. It works the exact same way today that it did 50 years ago.
But even then, like you could go back to the 20s, because when I understand with Britain and Australia, like you all moved away from the king and then created your own constitutions, and there's still some part of it that's connected. Nope.
Technically, okay, so this is going to get weird, okay? Because it's going to get weird. Brace yourself. Technically, the Prime Minister is not in the Constitution.
Right. Okay. Right.
And the ministers are not in the Constitution. Technically, the head of our armies is the Queen or the Governor General acting on her behalf or his behalf. Actually, it's the King now, which is horrifying. But aside from that, so technically in the Constitution, that is there. Now, there's only been one event ever where the Governor General, the Queen at the time's representative, fired the Prime Minister. And that gave rise to a quote that the next Prime Minister said that was, God save the Queen, because nothing will save the Governor General, and that bore out. He was absolutely turfed. So there's a saying in Australia that convention is stronger than law, that basically we generally ignore our Constitution entirely and go by convention. Yeah,
love that.
it's a terrible, archaic document. I think that the American Constitution is so much better. Even, I realize it has amendments that I may disagree with and things like that, but as a document for establishing a foundation, Australia's constitution is terrible, and it's technically still a monarchy. It's basically a what's the term for it? Something monarchy. It technically still is a monarchy because the head of state still is the monarch, technically. So we never actually, in law, moved away from England. We just kind of did so. I don't know. Like I said, it gets weird. It gets so weird because we kind of, England just sort of said, well, just go do your own thing when it had problems. And we just went, well, sure. Why not? Let's go. And then that
we're all here together.
Yeah. And so let's do Australia, and then sort of just ambled off in our own way. I think a comedian once said, we have a constitution. If there's any problem, we don't know what it says, but if there's any problems, we'll look at it. But for now, we're doing okay, so we don't need to. It's a very weird place, Australia.
I love that though. That makes it almost feels like that makes it. Once you just get enough political will to make your own constitution, that's kind of a beautiful convention to have, because your political figurehead can be a very malleable symbol. And that's why I think the American, like not having a king, but then our symbols being attached to these documents or these ideals don't really work. And why I usually go back even prior to, because America not having that symbol and then pretending like we did kind of. And then, because now we have not accepted that the symbol itself can look like anything, because we pretend like we don't have a symbol, but we also say that symbol has to be a white Christian, a male, most likely, if that makes sense. Like everyone has to swear on the Bible, even though you don't have to.
But you're not going to last long if you don't. Yeah, no,
right, we don't let our symbols actually break down, and it's so weird to me.
Yeah, it's got benefits and minuses, because, the last prime minister that we turfed before, the one we have, he basically took control of all of these ministries. So these like department of that they would have without anybody knowing, kind of thing. So there's loopholes that a constitution is designed to close that are still there. So it's not a perfect system, and it's got problems. So I think that writing a new constitution is what we should do, but I don't think most people really worry about it. They just don't care that much.
That's so cool.
It's weird. It's sort of this whole idea of we'll just get on with what you're doing and don't worry about it. But it can cause problems down the road. So I think that having a strong constitution is very good. I mean, something like the Diet in Japan, they wrote a constitution after World War II, which was not bad at all, actually. It was a pretty good document. So, of course, it was based a lot on the US Constitution, had different things in it. It was pretty good. So I think there's if we look worldwide, there's ways we can write these documents that are superior to the ones that have come before. That I think that sort of rewriting constitutions according to the zeitgeist that we're going through, according to what we need from it, rather than having a traditional document that we look back on and say, well, we've got to keep that because it said that. It's like the is it the Second Amendment, right to bear arms? Is that the one? Yeah, so that was written in the time where there were muskets and stuff, like it made sense at that time, but it doesn't make sense now. And I realize that's an amendment, it can be changed, but it's so hard to change any of those.
Right.
You need a 3/4 majority, I think, and I don't see that happening anytime soon.
Yeah,
at least.
we will definitely. It'll be I give it maybe a year or two before those rules break the three. Because the basic question, the basic answer I have for that is a system in a country that is extremely heterogeneous and has allowed through its documents anyone to be a part of the political system and contest that idea itself allows for this malleability. And so if you're a conservative Christian right perspective, like thinking about the future of your country, you would design a system like this if you know you're going to lose your population. If you know you're going to lose that public vote just because time and before we knew what contact theory was, you would design a system like this to gatekeep as much as you can before that happens. And I think that's why conservatism looks so much sillier than it used to. People aren't arguing the way they used to. But yeah, you've given me a lot of hope and thought today, and I'm gonna not take too much time here because I'm sure Evan has to get to bed too. But I would love to be able to network with you and be able to figure out how we can, talk with the prominent Christians and theologists out there to be able to add our perspective to it. And also the fact that we can riff on some other stuff is very, very fascinating because you're also a person in this space who doesn't just focus on the hard science. I love that you can go into where atheism or the lack of belief also means and the implications politically. I love that you can go there with that. It means a lot.
Yeah, I really have. We didn't even get into a number of topics. Like we could have gone to morality or basic philosophy and the origin of where your foundation is and things like that. And I love talking about all of that. We didn't even get onto gaming, which I love as well. Obviously, you guys love gaming. I love gaming, so we didn't even get onto that. No, I've got to talk to you again. I really do, because this has been great. Yeah, it's been 2 hours. Wow. All right. Okay. I do apologize. I can talk forever. So
us as well.
yeah, no problem. But yeah, it's been great, guys. I've really enjoyed talking to you. I will put this up, and so you guys run a Twitch chat. I'd love to link it in my description and link it in and say, check it out. You sort of broadcast. I think I checked it out. It was like Monday and Thursday nights, was it?
Wednesdays and Fridays, but but we're malleable.
Okay. Yeah. So yeah, check them out. They're doing socioeconomics and political stuff. And I guess all I can say, if you're getting started, I'm not a huge YouTuber or anything like that. I've had really incredible growth over the few months I've been doing this, basically. and it's mostly to agreeing to do stuff, even if it is intimidating or frightening, or just you sort of go, well, can I do that? Do it.
Yeah, I want to get plugged in. I just am trying.
Yeah.
I'm usually Twitter blasting people, so if any door that I can get let in, I would love.
Well, I don't do Twitter. I social media, to me, Facebook and Twitter, it's a bit too much. I get blasted. So I'm on the autism spectrum, and when I have too many incoming data sets, right on. It's not a dirty word, and that's sort of what I'm promoting recently. After a recent debate, I had a guy tell me that everything was my fault because
I saw that, and I was very upset. I was heated.
I can understand that. I was heated as well. I was sort of a bit upset, and I don't know, but really, when I think about when I'm getting angry and frustrated, a lot of people ask me, how do you stay calm? To some of the people that you talk to, like, how do you do it?
You do, yeah.
It's realizing that frustration and anger is born of fear. So what I'm asking myself is, what am I afraid of? What is making me afraid, rather than what am I angry about? Because it's a much deeper question. And I think with him, I'm kind of afraid that this I'll be treated badly, I'll be mocked, I'll be all of these things. So which is sort of, if you understand that, it's sort of catastrophizing. And we do that a lot. We go, if I appear on this thing, people might laugh at me, or I might do a bad job, or I might do this. And it's just realizing that isn't necessarily the case. It's your mind playing out worst case scenarios that you don't have a justification for. So examining why you think these things will happen is a really, really good exercise for me. Because I'm on the spectrum, and I have a lot of social anxiety. So speaking in front of people is really frightening to me, right? It's really frightening. So I go on Modern Day Debate, have hundreds of people watching, 7,000 views or something, and it's challenging, but that's what the challenge is for, right? You say yes and you challenge yourself, and then that catastrophe that you imagine just isn't reality. So I'd really encourage you, if you get a chance, drop in on an open mic or something, give your views. Don't worry about how it's going to be received. Just be authentic and yourself, and you'll do fine, Kennedy. You'll be great. You too, Evan. I know you're the quiet one. I get that. But I really did like your contribution. I would have liked to hear more from you, but that's okay. No, I get it. Right. You don't know me. I'm just coming in and blasting you with stuff. So yeah, I get it.
That's true. I've been a fan for a minute.
No, I'm sure. I forget the feeling that you're a talker when you get you going, Evan. Like when you get you on a subject that you like.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, it was an absolute pleasure to meet you both. I'm so glad I did this. And if you need anything, what can I help with? What can I help you guys with? I don't have a huge following. I've only got about 600 subscribers, so I'm not huge, not in any way, shape, or form. I can help you with and my technical stuff for doing art and photo. I have no artistic talent at all. I'm useless.
We will soon have a team to help with that.
Oh, fantastic!
A paid team.
Yeah, I'd love to find one myself. I don't know how I'd go about doing that, but yeah, that'd be great. But I can help with like the strategy and nuts and bolts with debate, like how you actually put together a position on a topic, argue it, and how to navigate through some of the tricks that you'll find in debate that will really trip you up, and some of the things you can do to sort of get your side across without sort of having to yell and scream kind of stuff.
That's exactly what I'm looking for, because a reason I sought you out is because I've seen you do a phenomenal job out of all of the atheist streamers and people that I've seen. I think you do probably one of the best jobs that I've seen, especially in terms of like really getting the person you're talking to double down on some cringy stuff, and the way you engage with the audience as you're talking. I really admire your perspective on it. I'm excited for you to see you grow, because there's not a lot of people that come at it I think, sort of with more vulnerability like that.
Oh, thank you. I really appreciate that. It does mean a lot to me. I simply, and this whole, I really want to push back against this debate bro culture that's currently getting started.
Yes.
It is so toxic and so horrible. You know, I might say, do you want to debate? If not, that's cool. You're fine. You know, not, I'm going to destroy you. I'm going to beat my chest. I'm going to,
Hmm.
a couple of people are out there doing it. It's kind of a strategy. They see it as sort of a sort of promotional thing, like in front of MMA kind of thing. I'm not doing it. I can't get into it. So
Yeah.
yeah, I really just want to go out there and do my best, let my arguments stand on their own. And to be honest with you, there's nothing like seeing somebody go out of a debate and go, oh, well, I destroyed you and you know, you were destroyed. And you just get the feeling that guy is so insecure about what they've just presented. If they'd presented a good argument, they wouldn't have to say all that. They would just be, yeah, I presented my argument
Yeah.
and it stands on its own kind of thing.
Yeah.
So
Instead of
yeah,
God forbid, I hope I persuaded them. I hope I did a good job. And
right.
they really made a good point when they said this.
Yeah, it's
Well,
yeah, that's actually something that when we were and still are actually talking about is like how do we navigate this space as leftists? Because what the algorithm primarily favors are those debate bros. It's like how do we build this infrastructure, this community that operates the way we want it to without us having to devolve into that for like views, basically.
Hmm.
Well, the leftist scene is definitely out there. I mean, you get people like Destiny and Borsch and people like that. They've got huge followings, like massive followings. And I don't see someone like Borsch as being particularly like that. He's not really that sort of beat your chest and say you're going to destroy people kind of stuff. Not a lot anyway, maybe a little bit. Yeah, I hear you.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Maybe if you come on a different time, we'll sway you on Vosh a little bit. But
Oh, okay. Well, I must admit I haven't seen a lot of him. I don't really follow.
We are way too tapped into the political
we're way too
streamers,
tapped into that,
unfortunately. Unfortunately.
Well, I mean, for the worst case scenario, you've got somebody like who is it? Infrared. He is probably the worst I've seen on
Yeah.
sort of leftist. Well, I'm going to crush you mentality kind of thing. It's just
baby brain stuff.
Yeah, and sort of toxic masculinity oozing from every pore kind of thing. Like it's really embarrassing.
Yeah.
But anyway, I've taken up way too much of the time. I'll let you get to bed. Thank you so much for allowing me to come in and chat. It's been a pleasure. Sorry,
just real quick.
Yeah.
So a little while ago, this was probably like 4 conversation topics ago.
Sure.
Liberty, one of our now a frequent viewer of ours, I guess.
Yep.
He asked,
you probably want to wipe out that last post there.
Yeah, I tried to mute them, but
oh my.
Yeah, I don't know how to delete that. We'll figure it out.
Oh, that's I got you. That has got to go away.
Yeah.
You
figured it out last time before me. But anyway.
Yeah. We'll touch on it. But so Liberty Twitcher asked yeah, he says, why does it matter whether the source of someone's political beliefs is religious or something else? Everyone forms their political stance based on something, so is religion so much worse than other things people base it on? And real quick, the way I want to kind of like answer this from my own side is that everything has an ideological root, right? So for the most part, it matters what religion you follow when you're talking about your political ideas, because your political ideas come from a specific root. So for instance, modern day conservatism has its roots in defending the monarchy while we were trying to, as a like global culture, move away from that. Part of the reason why the United States works the way it does is because while we were going through the American Revolution, we had to make so many concessions to monarchists who lived in Virginia. And we essentially didn't want to fight a 2-front war. So, you know, when you're talking about things like that, it matters because your ideas, the way you're perceiving the world, has roots, and you need to be conscious of those roots, because that can lead you down really bad or good paths. You just have to be aware of what they are.
Well, I would I would push back on that in a big way. So sorry, Evan, I'm gonna lay in here, mate. So yeah, the idea that a party is based in sort of something ages ago, like for instance, the Conservative was based in was protecting the monarchy, for instance. That's sort of a genetic fallacy because that's not necessarily what they are now. And that's sort of something that you know, just because, say, for instance, science had an origin in, you know, sort of monks and people educated in religion, doesn't mean that it is religious now. That would be a genetic fallacy.
Absolutely.
So it's not necessarily the case. The problem, what I would probably do is appeal to consequentialism. It's like, so it's not just religion, it's any belief that promotes something that is A, not demonstrably true, or B, negative to the well-being of society. So even, it doesn't need to be religion, even if it was people advertising crystals to cure cancer. We would say that shouldn't ought to be, and here was the oughts with morality, that shouldn't ought to be allowed to lobby government to promote that idea, because it is demonstrably harmful. People that do believe this will be causing harm to other people. So it isn't just religion, it's basically, we can examine the consequences of it happening and say, is that going to be good for society, or is it going to be bad for society? Or is it going to be amoral, has no effect whatsoever? And having something that you know is good for society, we don't mind, you know, happening. There's a lot of religious people who promote the separation of church and state, and the reason why is because they don't feel that the state should be able to govern how their religion operates. And I agree with that for that reason, and that religion shouldn't govern how the government operates. So they will promote that idea, and I've got no problem with that. But when you have a ideology that, or a religion that's promoting something that's potentially harmful or takes rights away from others, you know, if you have the Baptists trying to lobby to repeal rights for gay people kind of thing, that's harmful to people and our society. So that's where we say, hey, you shouldn't ought to be allowed to lobby for that because of your personal beliefs. So yeah, you're right, everything stems from personal beliefs, but we shouldn't allow people to influence the government with money. When
Sorry, I was not trying to advocate for that. Absolutely, please push me back on that. Sorry, not what I was saying at all.
We shouldn't ought to allow people to lobby. It's the same thing as okay, so the cigarettes companies lobbied the government for ages and ages and ages, even though they knew their product was harmful. That isn't something we should allow. It's harmful. So it's not specifically, and I would advocate that believing in something that is an ideology that is not demonstrably true is harmful for society in a general context. Like if you believe something that isn't true, it's harmful. But that's my personal belief. I wouldn't necessarily put that up against the idea that religion shouldn't lobby, but definitely stop them lobbying for, you know, take away abortion rights, take away rights from gay people, take away rights from trans people. These are harmful things.
Oh yeah, and I don't have anything to add because I agree with you with what you just said. And then well, I guess we'll leave on someone who's asking about restricting speech. We as a society decide to restrict speech through social convention, and then when it comes to harm, through law. So like, we're not saying the N-word here. You're not, hopefully, please don't. So like, we have social conventions around things that we decide to be harmful once it gets to a certain point. And I think that we decide those things because we recognize that there's harm, and there will always be people who disagree with them. And I don't think you can escape like personal beliefs. Being influenced by any, I think, conservative phenomena. So like the idea that you could have this for yourself and then someone else gets less, but you kind of win here. that whole notion of what could be influenced in our politics won't necessarily ever go away. Majority control of speech, no.
So I'm gonna pause real quick. This happened last time. We can't engage too much with some members of our audience because they get a little too happy with the attention.
Yeah, well, I mean, I'd just like to address that the idea that lobbying is speech. And if you're talking about lobbying as in going to Parliament and talking to a member of Parliament, I guess I'm using Australian terms here, that's fine. What we are talking about, though, is injecting money into a political party with probably a implicit expectation that they will do something for you. And that might not bear fruit, I do admit, that's not necessarily guaranteed. But at the point where you're, and we've got two major political parties in Australia as well, where you're putting money into both of them, that isn't supporting your team anymore. That's just out and out bribery. So lobbying with money being speech is the same idea that bribing a police officer is speech. And the person with the loudest voice is going to be the person with the most money. So that's what we've got to eliminate from our political systems. The idea that speech is how much money you've got. The convincingness of your speech is how much money you've got. It should be based upon the benefit of your ideas, the consequences of your ideas, not the amount of money you have access to.
Yeah, and we're not going to go down that route because we'll get into a conversation about what money is too. Because if you're talking about lobbying, you're really talking about governments giving access to private individuals to then control basically these resources we have decided will not be public. You know, like we're not letting certain aspects of because these lobbyists are going to do things because we have not decided to legally institute the public conversing around it. So that the questions about money in that realm just get way more convoluted because then but I appreciate the question about it because I do think lobbying is an issue, but it's definitely more about money, and it also depends on what country and what you're lobbying for, because I'm fine with lobbying for climate change, but I'm not fine with lobbying for cigarettes, and I think that's because we have definitions of harm. Right. I'm fine with my doctor doing this, not fine with him doing that. That doesn't mean I don't want doctors to go away.
Well, I'm fine with eliminating all money donations from organisations at all.
Same.
I'm fine with climate change not being able to give politicians money and cigarette companies not being able to give politicians money. Or what's even grievous is that the alcohol industry, for instance, which is alcoholism is a massive problem, causes massive issues. The lobby is well formed. It's prevalent. It's ubiquitous to society, and it basically is that they lobby all the time. Or Big Sugar. Okay, Big Sugar. I don't know the history of Big Sugar, but sure. I guess you're talking about the way that sugar is in every product in America. I've heard that, and
it's really bad.
Kind of horrifying.
It's horrible here. You can't eat anything without there being some form of heavily chemically altered sugar.
Everything has corn syrup and too much salt. Yeah. So
we're not saying that you can't indulge in sugar. That's your sort of and yes, it's a massive problem. Yeah, I get you. And we're not saying people can't do that if they want, but what we're trying to stop is the companies trying to influence our decisions. Like, for instance, you might want to put health warnings on food with a massive sugar through it. Yes, that's a good idea. That's beneficial for society, so we can make knowledgeable and reasonable decisions about how we want to live our lives. But the sugar industry would definitely lobby against that and inject a whole lot of money to stop it. That's something that ought to happen. We should make these decisions on their benefit for our society, not the benefit for the company.
Yeah, I agree. And we're going to leave you, Liberty, because you're asking questions that are separating things. I mean, also with what's happening in sugar in the UK, as someone who loves food science, politics way too much.
Yeah.
Way too much. What's happening in Mexico is a very different thing in the UK. It's more of you're talking about supply chain differences that are very, very, very different. But it is still, a problem itself as an entity. But how countries
Don't be sorry, Liberty. I love your questions. Seriously, I'm glad you asked them. Don't get me wrong. I'm not pushing back because I want to say, hey, you're an idiot bastard. No. They're good questions. Absolutely. I'm just getting my take on them. And for what it's worth, it's just my take. We can disagree if you want. That's cool. That's the great thing about it. We don't have to agree. I could completely disagree with Evan and Kennedy. completely think they're absolutely wrong, and we can still have a great conversation.
Right.
We can still interact. We can still disagree and have a really good conversation. It's all good, mate. It really is. Disagree as much as you want. That's good.
Yeah,
Agreed.
just to kind of add on to this, maybe I came out a little too harsh when I pushed back on engaging with our audience too much. This is for your benefit, Liberty. I think it was two, 3 streams ago. Kenny and I were having a conversation, and we started engaging with a certain audience member, and they started posting some really egregious stuff in the chat that was just available for people to see, and we had to go out of our way to mute and block that person repeatedly so that they would stop. So
and then change our chat features.
So I think actually this is a really interesting thing now, because now we have to talk about behind the scenes changing the way we allow the chat to function at all. So
well, the problem is sort of I think that's something you're just going to have to deal with like the best way you can. You can't look at people like they're going to do the same as this other person, because Liberty's obviously been engaged. He seems like he's asking good questions. He's not upset at all, and people like that are a benefit to you, whether they agree with you or not, because they're engaged and they're talking, and they bring up things in your mind, and that's the whole idea of getting into disagreements with people and debate and stuff. It clarifies things in your own mind. So I think it's a good thing. It's just, I'm completely aware of the sort of trolls and the issues that you're talking about, and I think that just in some way, content creators just have to deal with that. That's one of the stepping stones that you're just going to have, unfortunately. There's no perfect way to do it. There's always going to be troll. It's one of the problems with the internet, I guess.
We still super appreciate you, Liberty. Having people here is wonderful regardless, and thank you so much.
Having questions is awesome.
And so I'll leave you all here, and thank you so much for the immense time, like 2.5 hours. Wow, and I feel like we could definitely talk longer. So I hope we convene again soon.
Absolutely, yeah.
Oh, subscriber, thank you.
Thank you.
But I would love to convene again soon, and like if there's a way we can get connected. Yeah, James knows that I've emailed him 5 times, and I've been a part of the super chat. But I would love to be able to get connected with any of the people in that stream and talk to some of the.
So it's always better with James, particularly if you've had debate experience before. You can send him something saying, "Hey, this is the debate I did. This is I have been in a debate," kind of thing. So going to a smaller place than Modern Day Debate, which is probably
I've tried Standing for Truth. They haven't responded back to me yet either.
Okay. Well, I mean that's fine. I can probably have a word with Donnie and say, Kennedy from NeverGameOver is trying to contact you. What would be your what you're trying to debate?
I definitely think that probably more of the. If I'm focusing on sociology, something around the morality question, but God's existence can also be something easily. Okay. I'll just come at it from those perspectives, but God's existence or anything around the questions of morality, for sure.
Yeah, because I'm appearing on them next month sometime, so I should be able to have a word with Donnie and give you a thingo. Morality or God's existence, that's fine. He's kind of always on the lookout for new atheists, sort of, debate people. He usually likes evolution because he tries to get Kent in as much as
I would totally debate evolution with Kent. So, yes.
I basically last time I said no, I'm not debating Kent again. I've done it 3 times.
Yeah, you have.
He is. He says the same things over and over. There's nothing.
It's completely dismissive of you.
Well, I mean, it's just he's got nothing to bring to the table. He's just he doesn't even answer your questions. He doesn't engage at all. He just goes through his script in tired old man fashion. So I think I've done it 3 times, and that's enough for me. Maybe I'll take him on again if he's not locked up in prison in the near future. But I can certainly. Well, I mean, if you know the history, he is trying to fight a domestic violence charge that will probably get him jail time. 6 months or so, I think, was the sentence, and he's appealing. So that is quite possible that he'll land in jail pretty soon. again, you know, like it's not like
Again,
he hasn't been
right.
in jail before.
For the tax stuff.
But the tax stuff, right? So, yeah, it's very weird. So I've just sort of gone, nah, I'll just back off for the moment because it's got, yeah.
Yeah, he will be fun to debate, especially because of the. He's only debated a black person once who was just like sort of accepting of Christian ideology. So I'm
Oh,
just.
Jay.
Hmm.
Jay. Yeah, I know Jay. Yeah, so Jay's a scientist at the Lenski Labs that did the experiments with bacteria multiplying. So a lot of atheists got really angry about that, right? So he basically went in there and capitulated, essentially, which was an interesting tactic. I think he had his own thing he was doing.
For sure.
I think he was maybe trolling, like messing with not only the Christians but the atheists as well, which I found hilarious.
I did too.
I actually found that incredibly funny. Like I was laughing.
I did too.
like he basically went in there, and the look on his face was like, "Well, what do I do now?" He's agreeing with me. I found it hilarious. Like I thought it was so funny. And so I went into sort of an after thing going, oh, that was funny. And these people, like the atheist side, were mad, especially the scientists. They were ropeable. They were absolutely furious.
It was so entertaining, though. Yeah, I loved it.
Like, did nobody else find that hilarious? Apparently nobody did. So, but yeah, he sort of, he didn't have a serious debate, and that's cool. As I said to him, because before the debate, he was like, "Oh, well, how do I approach this? How do I do?" I'm like, "Well, it depends on what you're trying to do." I'm going in to have a serious debate. I'm going in to sort of, really seriously analyze these things, but that might not be your intention. What are you trying to get out of this? Is the question. Different people go into debate for different reasons. I mean, you look at someone like Alex Stein. He is there to troll the opponents. He's not there for a serious debate, right?
Right.
He's a joke. He's doing it for entertainment purposes.
Oh God, I don't know if I could debate. It might be fun. We might just troll each other. That'd be probably kind of fun.
but that's the thing. Like, just because I do something doesn't mean I expect everybody else to. But everybody expected him to do something that he didn't, and I think it's wrong. He doesn't owe you anything. He doesn't owe you to carry the argument you want him to carry. If he wants to do that, that's on him.
And Kent's never shut up that much before.
Right. It was actually
quite entertaining.
I don't know. I found it funny, so I
did too.
I really like Jay. I've got to call into his stream again because I really like talking to him. But
I'll try to get connected with him too. Yeah, it gave me hope. I was like, oh, I can having a conversation with Ken if I just let myself be free of trying to persuade him a little bit. I could make that very fun because he's got so much going on and he does the same thing every single time. So I think it'd be fun.
Well, there's various tactics that he's got that sort of, we've got a group of few people, like Atheist Junior is a real good friend of mine. He's very keenly aware of the tactics that he's got. He gish gallops a lot, so he goes on from topic to topic to topic, and then accuses you of doing it, which is kind of hilarious. He has a way of making analogies that are terrible, like comparing a biological organism to a car. But you sit there and go, how can you possibly compare these?
Microsoft Computer Code.
Right, Microsoft Computer Code, which, I mean, we kind of call DNA a code, but it's not sort of an algorithmic code, so it's not the same as, DNA. So, there's all of that going on. He uses a lot of tactics. And, I mean, it's kind of hard because he's actually, as a rhetoricist, like as actually a speaker, he's actually good. Like, I'm not going to say, hey, he sucks at debate. No, his arguments are terrible, but the way he presents them is fluid and hard to track, and he actually is good at what he does. So I will give him that. A lot of people have stepped in with him and gone, yeah, he's terrible. I'm just going to, take him out. And no, it's a lot harder than you think to debate him at home.
I've spent hours trying to. He is probably the most fascinating out of all of them to debate. Like Donnie, I want to talk to. T-Rock, I think his name is. There are a few people out there who I think I'll have good discussions with, but Kent just feels like that's just going to be fun. It's going to be fun as hell.
Well, if you want, I can talk to Donnie and sort of say, if you come up with a
Oh my God,
debate
yes.
challenge, I can talk to Donnie and say, hey,
I'll talk to him about anything. He can pick it. I don't care. I would.
it'll be evolution. He won't discuss his own worldview. He will never discuss sort of creationism as the topic, right? Because as soon as he starts sort of saying God and Bible and all this kind of stuff, you go, well, let's talk about that because you've brought it up. He'll just go, no, the debate's about evolution. I don't want to talk about that. It's very calculated the way that he won't, he'll bring it up, but he won't actually discuss it because then he's got to support his own worldview, not just pick holes in evolution. So he won't do it. He won't do it. And I've pressured Donnie and said, no, I want to do creationism versus evolution. He won't even do that. He won't discuss it. So it would have to be evolution.
Yeah,
but today, I'll make a note of it. Today I will send off Candy, and I'll shoot him your email address if you want to give it to me.
Just the one I emailed you from.
Yeah. I've got it. So I'll send that off and then sort of say you're an atheist looking to debate Hovind. And see what we get back. Yeah.
Cool.
Sweet.
Yeah.
All
and
right.
then as a final request, if you come across any in your audience, any activists who are fighting for certain things and you think they'd be a good person for us to interview, please send them our way. We'd love to talk to them.
Absolutely.
So sort of leftist activists,
Or even like just normal people who are wanting to do something. They don't have to be specifically leftist. Just
okay.
Yeah.
No worries. I don't know. I don't. So the thing is, like, I kind of put myself out there, but I don't know a whole heap about my audience sort of political views. I sort of, I put my view out there and assume that, they accept me for who I am.
It seems like they do. Your Discord's very nice.
My Discord?
Or the places that you've done in that Discord, like, chat that you join sometimes for a few hours? Whatever that chat is? Or do you post, where do those come from? The, like, chats, it looks like Discord chats that you're in sometimes, like mic nights or something, where you're in there with a few people and where you just jump in for a second.
Oh, that's StreamYard. That's StreamYard. So usually someone will just have an open mic and give a StreamYard link. It'll go to a web application called StreamYard. You just have to make an account.
Okay, we have that.
You don't even need a camera. You just need a microphone, and you can jump in, give your opinion. Open mic nights, everyone's welcome. I'm usually hanging out at Amy Newman's. I do like to go there a lot because she is hilarious, and she's taught me a lot about how to handle people that are openly hostile to me. She's incredible. If you've never seen her, she's absolutely amazing.
I want to note that.
Amy Newman, she's the night manager for atheism. She's usually on very, very late at night, and that works perfectly for me because that's during the day for me. And she is Jewish and hilarious, and just amazing. And I also go to Gur streams a lot. I drop by Jay Pasic a lot and things like that. But it's all StreamYard. All you have to do is just make a StreamYard account. It's easy as.
Okay.
But come on in, just get in there and sort of say what you think. And, you've got, a good background. You've got a good knowledge about what you're talking about. I don't see why you shouldn't, just get out there.
Understood.
All right.
Well, yeah, thank you so much. Now it's turned into 3 hours, but
that's
my God.
That's fine. I don't have anything on this. I'm fine.
Yeah, thank you so much. You've given us a world of time, and I'm really excited because the debate arena will be really, really helpful, especially because the video essays and sort of the persuasion of these ideas and what hopefully if we can plug you into some of the MMT stuff, that'll be really fun to connect with, considering that you hold a lot of these views. So sort of a good foundation of money viewed through this lens will actually connect with a lot with the work that you do. So I'm excited to just convene more, and I thank you for your time.
Just be aware, economics is not my strong point. I've got to say, I'm terrible at economics. I was saying to Lee, I have no idea when it comes to socioeconomic stuff. Yeah. You've got to be aware of your weaknesses as well, right? So that's definitely one of mine. But cheers, it's been fantastic, guys. I'm going to take off, but yeah, thank you so much for having me on. It's been an absolute pleasure to talk to you, really. And I look forward to talking to you in future. It's been really, really amazing. And yeah, good luck in everything you do. And I really wish you the best. I really do. If I can do anything to help, hit me up. Definitely. I will be around. No problem at all. But take care. And yeah, I will see you later.
Take care.
Awesome meeting you, man.
Awesome. All right. Let's go ahead and end.